Hello, dear
Здравствуйте, дорогие
friends.
друзья!
The Club
Клуб
of Seekers of
искателей
Reliable Knowledge
достоверных
from
знаний
St.
из
Petersburg
Санкт-Петербурга
is glad to
снова
welcome you
рад
again.
вас приветствовать.
Let's get along
Давайте
with the world
ладить мир
together, make it
вместе,
brighter,
делать его
kinder, and more
светлее,
joyful.
добрее и радостнее.
Subscribe to our
Подписывайтесь на
channel,
наш
rate the
канал,
video, give a thumbs
оценивайте
up, well
видео,
or down,
ставьте
and leave your
большой палец
questions in the
вверх,
comments.
ну или вниз, и оставляйте свои вопросы в комментариях. У
Today,
нас
we have the second
сегодня
part of the lecture for
выступает
you,
для вас
The
со
Absolute
второй
Good of
частью
Evolution,
лекции
Sergei Ivanovich
«Абсолютное
Suhonos,
благо
a Russian
эволюции»
cosmologist,
Сергей
thinker,
Иванович Сухонос,
philosopher, and writer
русский
who is
космист,
very much loved by
мыслитель,
all of us.
философ и писатель, очень всем нам полюбившийся.
So,
Итак,
today we are
сегодня мы
listening to
слушаем
the second
вторую
series of this
серию
topic, Love,
из
Justice, and
данной
Competition in the
тематики
Social
«Любовь,
World.
справедливость и конкуренция в социальном мире».
Please,
Пожалуйста,
Sergei
Сергей Иванович.
Ivanovich.
Dear viewers, I am asking you to watch the previous recording under the SPIM, because what I'm going to tell you now is a very interesting topic for me. For example, it was a revelation when I guessed what the secret was, as they say, what the dog was buried in there. Here is a topic devoted to issues such as love, justice, competition, and the highest expediency in the social world. In fact, these are four concepts that denote the four regulators of social life. It is they who solve the issues of sustainable development of society. These are love, justice, competition, and the highest expediency. And I'm going to show you this very simply and clearly now with the help of one scheme, just one scheme. But I'll show you. But the previous entries I did the same for the biological world. The biological world is not a social world. The biological world is the animal world. We are in the animal world with one foot. We are in the social world with the other. And mentally we are carried away into the spiritual world. And this is the third topic of the spiritual world that the third conversation will be devoted to. There will also be considered these issues of love and justice, competition in the spiritual world, and higher expediency. The same regulators work perfectly in the biological world, in the social, and in the divine world. But how would I draw your attention to the first conversation? In the first conversation, such concepts as similarity and likeness were just considered. Why? Because most people perceive all these four regulators, unfortunately, as a kind of one-level concept. In other words, they do not distribute these regulators at different levels of the hierarchy. And this leads to a misunderstanding of the world from my point of view. The world is actually very simple. There are only four levels in it, a living world, that is, regulation. These four levels, they are the same for animals, for people, and for the divine world. But so to speak, these concepts, they are separated by hierarchical levels. And when we try to apply justice for the competition market from one level, let's say there, we get into a gap. Why? Because there is no justice based on competition. Competition doesn't work so much in the family. In other words, some laws work at the family level, at the level of human relations, and other laws work at the social level. And this transition from one law to another turns out to be completely unexpected for many. They're like this. I know people who are just upset. How is it that we treat our employees so well there? They treat us and so on. And so on, and so on. This is all going on because of confusion in the head. It's just that people get confused with four pines. Here to deal with these four pines, we will need only 30 or 40 minutes only. But to do this, you will need to turn on your imagination and imagine the hierarchy of our world. And once again, for the third time, I ask you to pay attention to the first lecture, where the idea of similarity without similarity of our world and of different laws at the hierarchical level is literally chewed up in detail, so to speak. But for those who are too lazy to do this, I will still do a little run on this topic as an introduction. And only then we will go on a journey according to the laws of social existence. Now you see, I hope, what I see, that is, a big screen on which there are all sorts of beautiful words. So, we are going on a journey on this topic. First, we introduce you again to the topic of large-scale non-invariance. It's really huge for everyone. It occupies a very large place in my work. Several books written back in the 80s, 90s, and 0 years are devoted to this topic. But now I'm going to try to spend literally 3 slides on this topic so that you understand what we are talking about. The most famous, the most ancient law of scale invariance of non-invariance is the Hermes Trismegistus law. It sounds like this. What is below is similar, but not equal to what is above. And what is above is similar to what is below, for the viscous development of the wonders of a single thing. It means that everyone pays attention to the words, what is at the top is similar to that. But few people pay attention to the postscript like, but not equal. Here we are just going to rely on not equal. And we are going to talk about large-scale non-invariance in the universe. Its essence is that different scale slices and layers have their own specific forces, principles of symmetry, laws of interaction. Well, for example, gravitational forces act in space, which no longer have any meaning in atoms. Inside atoms, for example, the electromagnetic forces that we see, which organize all bodies, and they also act around us. They are very weak in space. They have almost no effect on anything. There are strong interactions inside the core. That is, depending on the size, it is necessary to choose both forces and laws. And this is all very well known to physics. And here is a very interesting picture. It shows the hierarchy of our universe from minus 33rd maximum to metagalaxy. But as if on the right, here you cannot look to the left. Some disciplines that study some areas are written on the right. Well, for example, astronomy, astrophysics studies metagalaxy. Astronomy is also studying the galaxy. Astronomers are studying the stars at a completely different level. The planet is studied by planetary scientists. Stones are studied by minerals. Minerals are studied by physicists, specialists in minerals. In the biological world, the social world is studied by sociologists, physiological physicians, biologists, cellular cytologists. The intracellular world is studied by molecular scientists who are engaged, for example, in biological molecular physics or chemistry. Physicists are already working at the level of atoms. Chemists are already working at the level of molecules, at the level of nuclear physics. And none of these specialists would think of applying the laws of, let's say, the social world to explain the interaction of two atoms, and vice versa. It would not occur to me, for example, to take the molecular laws of interaction. Let's say oxygen and hydrogen there, and carbon there, and try to use them to explain what love is, what justice is, let's say there, and so on. Or, let's say, in order to explain how the galaxy works. Well, completely different laws. This has long been known to all scientists. Here they have long divided the world into such levels, layers, and we still in the social world cannot make the same division in simple things, in our laws. Here we are going to do this with you now, and you will see how everything will immediately be ordered and fall into place. And it will become clear, transparent, and easy. So, our topic is the non-invariance of social regulators without similarity in the social world, to put it simply. And therefore, the theme sounds like this, where instincts, love, justice, and competition work and do not work. So, let's go. Let's remember that our social world, it is hierarchically arranged. In other words, the smallest dwelling of the social world is a family, then a community, a labor collective, then, let's say. There in the past it was tribes, nationalities of the people. Now it's a little different. It's, let's say, a city, a country, a nation, culture, civilizations, and a universal global planetary human society. That's how all this, as it turned out, can be applied in order to spread such concepts as love, the fairness of competition, the highest expediency on different shelves of the social hierarchy. This picture essentially explains everything. Those people who grasp on the fly with half a word, you can no longer listen to me, they will understand everything anyway. Why? Because there's a scale axis visible on the right. Here it goes, a little black arrow. Yes, there are no numbers here. But the family is the size of the order of hundreds of meters. Let's say when a peasant family cultivates a field, it means she has a house there, a field, hundreds of meters. The labor collective is already a factory. It is an enterprise. Society is already a country, for example. A completely different scale is huge, and humanity is the whole planet. In other words, what is changing? With the transition from the family to the labor collective and to the state, their humanity changes in scale. And at each of the scales, just as in physics, there are different laws of regulation. We are going to look at them now, but those who have already understood everything cannot look further. So, goodbye to those who understood everything. Stay with those who want to look further. Let's start with the zero level. A person is an individual. What is an individual person? This is the same person as the animal, which is depicted here as a hunter with a dog, who, in order to survive, must do what? He must find food, take care of blood, take care of the house, take care of comfortable conditions, about living. But a modern person is not just a hunter. He is already a person who works at an enterprise, who needs to devote much more time to taking care of himself. And this is a whole complex of worries. And there are people who live completely alone, without a family. They exist in our society. And this is what they do. This is the very self-sufficiency for self-survival. And here the same survival instinct works, which we talked about in our previous lecture, in our previous conversation. But as soon as a person creates a family, he finds himself in a completely different situation. A family is already a collective. It is no longer one person. The scale of this collective is getting bigger. This already happens at least, let's say, 3 people, parents, a child. There are many children and much more, so to speak. Completely different concerns arise here. And most importantly, you need to take care not only of yourself, but you need to take care of the children and each other. In other words, these are tasks that arise that are related to the family. These tasks are more difficult than taking care of yourself by an order of magnitude, because you have to continue to take care of yourself. You're not going anywhere from yourself. Take care of your health in the same way you do if you live alone. But there is also a need to take care of each other, not to care about relationships. And now we're going to look at what works best here. First of all, what kind of families are there? Let's get started. Here we have listed the biological families of the simplest zero families. Random connections, when, let's say, 2 birds flew there, or a guy and a girl met somewhere, and after certain actions, a child is born to them. That is, a child is born, of course, a girl, a woman, but a guy is not born, he just forgets about this meeting. And there remains a poor woman with a child in her arms, a single mother, a casual relationship. This is what happens in most species of the animal kingdom. In other words, this is exactly how it all happens there. If you want to see how this happens, look in the spring, how packs of dogs run after a female, after a bitch. This is roughly what happens in many, unfortunately, cases in our country now, in our social world. But in the biological world, there are temporary families that arise for the period of raising chicks, cubs, when, let's say, the female sits with the chicks and the male brings them food. But as soon as the chicks fly away, the family breaks up. But this is already better, because joint care is already stronger ties. There are families for a long time. The life expectancy of these families depends on the life expectancy of the most important member of this family. This is the strongest male in the district. So-called harem families. They exist in different forms. There are chimpanzees, monkeys, and, in my opinion, sea lions. When, let's say, a large male, the strongest, most prolific, productive, he gathers a harem of females, and all the cubs are born from him, and he ruthlessly expels the rest of the males. Since he is stronger, natural selection takes place, and the strongest offspring remains. This is also reasonable. It happens all the time in the biological world. There was such a thing in the social world. Until now, maybe there is somewhere. Harems existed in the Arab world, and not only in the East. It seems to me that harems exist in other places, but not the point. The bottom line is that there are also such families. But, by the way, there is the highest kind of family. From my point of view, this is a kind of family, a paired family. When a male and a female in the biological world are united for life. This is the so-called, so
называемая,
to
так
speak,
сказать,
swan
лебединая
loyalty.
верность.
In addition
Кроме
to
лебедей,
swans,
такие
such
семьи
families form
образуют
about
еще около
20 more
20 видов
species of
живых
living animals.
животных.
I
Я
don't
там не помню,
remember
какие
which ones
именно, но
exactly,
среди них
but
есть
among them
весьма,
there are very strange
так
for us,
сказать,
in my opinion.
странно, так сказать,
There
для
are
нас. По-моему,
mice
там
that form
мыши,
an eternal
которые
family.
образуют
There are fish that
вечные,
form.
семьи.
There are
Есть рыбки,
birds,
которые
swans.
образуют, есть птички, вот
In my
лебеди.
opinion, a wolf
По-моему,
and a
волк с
she-wolf
волчицей
also
тоже
form such a
образуют
family.
такую
Love exists
семью.
there until the
Любовь до гроба
grave,
там
as it
существует,
were.
как бы.
Pigeons,
Голуби,
in my
по-моему, тоже
opinion,
так
also do the
поступают.
same,
Но
but
биологи
biologists
насчитывают
count
таких
only
вот
about 20
примеров
such
всего около
examples.
20.
This is
Это
what's
то,
in
что
the
в биологическом
biological
мире.
world. But what
А
about
вот
the
что
social
в
world?
социальном мире?
The
Семья в
family in the
социальном
social
мире
world
постепенно
has
стала
gradually
самым
become the most
главным, так
important
сказать,
way of raising
способом
children
выращивания
and
детей
leaving
и оставления
offspring.
потомства.
And
И
why?
почему? Мы сейчас с вами
We will deal
разберемся,
with you
и
now,
вы
and
поймете,
you
что
will
в этом есть
understand that there is the deepest
глубочайшая
logic and
логика и
expediency in this.
целесообразность.
The expediency of
Целесообразность
increasing the
повышения
vitality of our human
живучести
community with
нашего с
you.
вами человеческого сообщества.
The whole
Вся
problem is that
проблема
people
в том,
differ from
что
each other,
люди
sometimes
отличаются
more than
друг от
different
друга
types of
иногда
animals.
больше, чем разные виды животных. Об
Various
этом много
experts talk a lot about
говорят
this,
разные, так сказать,
but Saveleaf
специалисты.
talks about
Вот
it a lot,
Савельев об этом
a
очень много
well-known expert
говорит,
in the field of the brain.
известный специалист в области мозга.
Why?
Почему?
Because
Потому
our
что
social
наш
world, it
социальный мир, он
develops
развивается
unevenly.
неравномерно. В
In some
некоторых
areas, these are the
областях это
aborigines of
аборигены
Australia who
Австралии,
still
которые
live
до
in the
сих пор
very
живут,
initial
так сказать, в
social
самом
world.
начальном
In
мире
other places, in
социальном.
America,
В
for
других
example,
местах, в
people
Америке,
live there
например,
in
люди
advanced
там в
countries,
передовых
for
странах живут,
example.
например.
And the
И
spectrum of
спектр
possibilities, the spectrum of
возможностей, спектр
understanding the
понимания
world,
мира,
the
спектр
spectrum of
культур, он
culture is
огромен.
huge.
По
In
сути
fact,
дела, можно
we can
говорить
talk not
не
about
об
one
одном
kind of
виде
human beings,
человеческих
but about the sum of
существ,
species.
а о сумме видов.
Here,
Вот.
in the
В
sum
сумме
of social
социальных
species,
видов. Не
not
биологических, все мы
biological,
друг от друга
we are all no
ничем не
different from each
отличаемся в
other
биологическом
biologically.
виде,
Well,
ну,
almost
почти
no
не
different.
отличаемся.
There
Есть
are
кое-какие
some
отличия, там
insignificant
несущественные,
differences
но
there. But now, however,
сейчас,
I
правда,
have said
я
a
сказал
phrase
фразу,
that will
которую
surely be
наверняка будет
disputed by the
оспаривать тот же
same
самый
Saveleaf,
Савельев, который
who
говорит, что
says that
наши
our
мозги
brains differ
отличаются
even
даже
biologically, that is,
то
physiologically,
есть
very
в физиологическом
significantly from
плане
each
очень
other.
существенно друг от
That's
друга.
right.
Это так, но
But we
мы как
will,
бы
as it
сделаем такое
were, make
допущение,
the
что мы
assumption that we
в
are
физиологическом,
physiologically,
биологическом виде
biologically the
одинаковы.
same,
А в
but
социальном
socially we
мире
are
мы
very
очень
different.
разные. Более
Moreover,
того,
if
если
earlier,
раньше,
let's
допустим, в
say,
христианской
it meant
жизни это было
absolutely nothing in peasant
совершенно
life, then in our
ничего не
world,
значило,
where
то
there
в
are a
нашем
lot of
мире,
specialties,
где очень много
professions,
специальностей,
hobbies, and
профессий,
so on,
увлечений и
it
так далее,
becomes of
это
gigantic
приобретает
importance.
гигантское значение.
Now, I think that most of the
Вот. Я
listeners
думаю, что
have families
большинство
in one
слушателей
way
так
or
или
another.
иначе имеют
Someone
семьи, кто-то
tried to
пытался их
organize them,
организовать, кто-то
someone met.
встречался, кто-то
Someone
искал
was
себе
looking
пару
for
на
a
всю
couple
жизнь.
for life
И
and
наверняка
probably
знает,
knows how
какой
difficult
трудно,
it is to
как
make this
трудно сделать
choice.
этот выбор.
It's much
В
harder
разы
than
труднее,
animals,
чем
you know.
животным,
In
понимаете?
animals, the
У
choice
животных
is made
выбор
in what
осуществляется
way?
каким образом?
The
Самочка
female looks,
смотрит,
which
какой
male
тут
is
рядом
stronger
самец
next to
более
her?
сильный.
Well, there
Ну,
are
на
2 or
выбор
3
там
males to
2-3
choose
самца
from,
перед ней
jumping in front
прыгают,
of
так
her,
сказать,
so to
показывают
speak,
свои удары,
showing their
выбирают
luck.
одного,
She
и
chooses
после этого
one.
они там могут
And
организовать
after
свою
that, they can
семью,
organize
семью
their
на
family,
долгие
therefore many
годы
years of
жизни.
life.
А
And for
нам-то
us
людям
people,
как
how
смотрят?
difficult it is. Here's a
Вот
man,
мужчине,
what kind
какую
of woman
женщину
to
выбрать,
choose,
какую
what
девушку
kind of
выбрать
girl to
в
choose in
этом
this huge
огромном
world.
мире?
In
В
Russia,
России,
or
а может,
maybe
в
in
Японии,
Japan,
а может
or
быть, в
maybe in
Америке.
America.
Вот
Here
в
in this
этой
village
деревне
or
или
in
в
this
этом
city.
городе.
This
Вот
beautiful
эту
blonde, or this may
красавицу-блондинку
be
или
very
эту, может
warm,
быть, очень
sincere,
теплую, душевную,
not
не
so
столь
beautiful brunette.
красивую, так сказать,
Well, from
брюнетку.
such a choice, so to
Ну,
speak,
от
my
такого
head is
выбора,
spinning.
так сказать, кружится
But one
голова.
way
Но
or
так или
another,
иначе
the
выбор
choice is made.
осуществляется. Потом
Then
рождаются
children are
дети. И
born.
поскольку так
And
или иначе
since
этот выбор не
one way
случайный,
or
то есть пара
another, this
образуется по
choice is
каким-то
not accidental,
комплементарным
that is,
признакам и по
a couple
признакам
is formed
схожести, то
according
и
to
дети
some
появляются в
complementary
такой
signs
семье,
and signs of similarity,
близкие
then children appear in such a
по
family,
типу
close in type of
сознания к
consciousness to their
родителям.
parents. And it
И
turns out that
получается,
this is
что
very
это
important.
очень важно.
Why?
Почему? Потому
Because
что
for
для детей,
children who were
которые
born in
родились
a
в семье,
family,
важно
it is
вырасти в
important to
этом
grow up in this
семейном
family
мире,
world because
потому что
it is
именно
in
в
this
этом
family
семейном
world
мире они
that they will
получат от
receive from their
родителей
parents,
в
first
первую
of all,
очередь то, что
what
им
they need
нужно
in
для
order
того,
for
чтобы
them
они
to mature
созрели и
and
стали
become
полноценными
full-fledged
членами
family
семьи.
members. Do you
Понимаете?
understand?
Потому что
Because
если
if a child
ребенка
from the
из
same
одной
family,
семьи,
let's let's say, there are classical music lovers to give a family of homeless people. Then a poor child, I don't envy him. But also the reverse substitution. I know a lot of cases, real cases, when highly intelligent, cultured people took children from an orphanage, from dysfunctional parents. And after this puberty took place, somewhere that begins at the age of 12 or 14, children turn on their homeless program, unfortunately. And it's very difficult to come to terms with it, but it works absolutely incredibly hard and breaks all the add-ons that were created by this culturally intelligent family, so it breaks mercilessly.
Вот, и ломает без
I'm not
жалости.
going to scare you
Я не
here
буду вас
with all
пугать
these
всякими
stories
этими
that are
историями,
happening.
которые
I know
происходят.
quite a
Я
lot
их
of
знаю
them.
достаточно много.
But what am
Но
I
это я к
talking
чему
about?
говорю? Что
That the
перестановка
rearrangement of
детей из
children from
семьи в
family
семью
to family is meaningless
бессмысленная, вот без
without taking into
учета,
account this is
это
bad.
плохо.
It
Лучше,
is
если
better
ребенок
if the child
растет
grows up in the same
в одной
family with his
семье у
parents.
своих родителей.
That
То
is,
есть
I
я
say better.
говорю лучше,
Why?
почему? Потому что это
Because
лучше
it's
для
better for the
блага
good of
эволюции.
evolution. And this
А
is
это
the highest
высшее
and
и абсолютное
absolute
благо.
good. Now let's
Теперь
see what happens if,
посмотрим, что
let's
будет,
say,
если,
this
допустим,
does
этого
not
не будет,
happen,
во-первых.
first
Во-вторых,
of
сначала
all,
посмотрим,
and
как
secondly. First,
долго
let's
должна
see how
существовать
long a
семья,
family
чтобы
should exist so
могли
that such
появляться
children
такие
can
дети,
appear
которые
who grow
вырастают в
up in a
семье.
family. To
Значит,
begin
начнем с того,
with, the
что
preparation for life lasts up
значит,
to 14 to
подготовка к
23
жизни
years.
длится
14
до
years is when a child is
14-23
already
лет. Вот
becoming
14
more
лет,
or
когда
less
ребенок уже
independent,
становится
can go
более-менее
somewhere to
самостоятельным,
work
может
as an
отправиться
apprentice.
куда-то под мастерье
And
работать, а
23 is
23
after
это после окончания
graduation,
института.
for example,
Да?
right?
Вот
This
этот
period of
промежуток
time
времени,
is,
это,
that
то
is,
есть, это
this is
время
the
для того,
time
чтобы
to raise a
вырасти
full-fledged adult in the
полноценного
family.
взрослого человека.
Further, the following fact. In order for
Дальше,
society
следующий
to simply
факт.
remain
Для
in the
того,
number
чтобы
that it
просто
is,
социум
well, let's
оставался
say
в
we
той
have
численности, которой он
140
есть,
million
ну,
years,
допустим, у нас 140 миллионов или
130 million
130 миллионов
according
по
to
разным
various
оценкам
estimates of the
населения
population
России.
of Russia. It is
Необходимо, чтобы
necessary that the
средний
average
коэффициент
coefficient of
детей
children
в
in a
семье
family
был
be 2 and 3 tenths.
2,3.
What is 2 and 3
Что
tenths?
такое 2 и 3
So, in
Значит,
principle,
в
it is
принципе,
necessary
нужно,
that there
чтобы
are
в
3
семье было
children in the
3
family.
ребенка. Двух
2 children are
детей
not
мало.
enough. Why?
Почему? Потому что,
Because,
во-первых, дети
firstly,
могут умереть,
children
к
can die,
сожалению, а
unfortunately,
во-вторых, так
and
сказать,
secondly,
кто-то без
someone
детей,
without children.
и поэтому
And so
средний
the average
коэффициент 2,3.
coefficient is 2 and 3 tenths.
Но,
But, generally speaking,
вообще-то
2
говоря,
and 3 tenths is
2,3.
taking into
Это с
account the
учетом
fact
того,
that
что
there are,
есть,
so to speak, if we take into
так
account
сказать, если учесть,
that there
что
are families
есть семьи
without
без детей,
children,
то надо,
then
чтобы
it is
было 3
necessary that there
ребенка
are
в
3
семье.
children in the family.
Если в
If there
семье
are
3
3 children
ребенка,
in a family, then such a
вот,
society
то
will not disappear
такой
from the
социум не
evolutionary
исчезнет
plan.
с эволюционного
It will
плана,
not
не
dissolve
растворится
forever
в
without a
вечности, то
trace.
есть без следа.
It will at least
Он будет
exist.
как минимум
And if there
существовать.
are 3,
А если
4,
3,
5,
4, 5,
then
то
this
этот социум
society will
будет
expand in
расширяться в
number, and its
численности и
number
будет
of people,
увеличиваться
the
его
number of Russian
количество
people,
людей.
no
Количество
matter
русских
who,
людей,
will
неважно
increase.
кого. К
Unfortunately,
сожалению, вот
this
этот
factor
факт,
is
он
very low
сейчас
right now.
очень низок.
In
В
Europe,
Европе
somewhere, in my
где-то, по-моему,
opinion, it has
приблизился
approached
к
1 and a
1,5,
half,
если
if
не к
not 1
1,3
and 3
коэффициенту.
coefficients.
То есть
In other
Европа
words,
стремительно
Europe is
вымирает,
rapidly
она
dying out.
исчезает, и
It
я
is
думаю, что
disappearing,
через 100
and I
лет
think that in 100 years,
никто уже
no
той
one will
старой
recognize
Европы,
the old
которую мы
Europe that
знали,
we
не
knew.
узнает. Это
It
будет
will be a
совершенно другая
completely
Европа,
different
которая в
Europe,
основном будет
which will mainly
доминировать
be
арабы,
dominated
негры,
by Arabs,
вот,
blacks,
может быть, даже
maybe even
латиносы
Latinos will come
приедут.
from this.
То есть
In other
Европа
words,
сама
Europe
себя
has put itself
поставила
on the
на
stop.
стоп.
Here,
Вот.
no
Как
matter
бы
how
они там
smart they
умно не
look,
выглядели,
no
какие бы
matter what
теории они
theories
не
they roll
закатывали
up to
сами себе,
themselves,
как бы они
no
сами
matter
себя
how
не
they convince
убеждали, но
themselves,
Европа катится
but
к
Europe is heading for
исчезновению,
extinction as a cultural
как
phenomenon.
культурный феномен.
This is an
Это
indisputable fact.
неоспоримый
It
факт,
is
он
constantly
обсуждается
discussed,
постоянно, но
but
ничего
nothing can
произойти не
happen.
может.
That's where
Вот
Merkel
там
is trying
Меркель
to save
пытается
at the
спасти
expense of these waves of migration
за счет этих
situations.
волн миграционных
Perhaps this will help in some
ситуаций.
way,
Возможно,
but
это
somehow the
поможет
situation is
каким-то
quite
образом.
critical.
Но так
Oddly
или иначе
enough,
ситуация
it is critical
достаточно
in Russia
критична.
as
Как ни
well.
странно, она и
We
в
have
России
either a
критична. У
coefficient
нас
of 1.5 or 1 and 7.
то ли 1,7,
I don't
я
remember
точно не помню, он
exactly.
тоже
It's
очень
also very
низкий.
low. And
И
even,
даже,
it
казалось,
seemed,
в
in a
традиционном
traditional state
таком
like
государстве,
Chechnya,
как
the
Чечня,
coefficient
коэффициент
became
стал
1 and 9.
1,9. То есть
In other
Чечня
words,
тоже, в
Chechnya,
общем-то,
too,
начала
in general,
исчезать как
began to
таковая, по
disappear as
сути дела.
such, in fact.
Вот
That's
это вот
amazing as
удивительно.
far as I
Насколько я
know.
знаю, может быть,
Maybe
я
I'm
ошибаюсь
wrong
насчет
about
Чечни. Я
Chechnya.
думаю, Кадыров
I
меня
think
поправит,
Katie
если
Rav will correct me
ошибаюсь.
if he hears my lecture and raises
Поднимет
the
флаг
flag of a
новой
new birth rate.
рождаемости.
Here.
Вот. Но это
But it
говорит о
says
чем? О
what?
том, что люди
That people
перестали
stopped wanting
хотеть
to reproduce.
размножаться, они
They
перестали
stopped
хотеть
wanting to leave
оставлять
offspring.
потомство, они
They stopped
перестали
wanting
хотеть
to have
заниматься
children.
детьми.
Why?
Почему?
Because
Потому что
children
дети
are always
это
a hassle,
всегда
a lot of
хлопоты,
work. I know
большой
this
труд, я
firsthand.
это знаю не
I have 2
понаслышке.
daughters.
У
Well,
меня
that's
2 дочери,
okay.
но это
My
ладно,
youngest
моей
daughter has
младшей
3
дочери
granddaughters.
3
Here
внучки,
they are
вот
now
они сейчас
outside the
за
door.
дверью там
They're trying
пытаются
to
тихо
behave
себя вести.
quietly. But my
Вот. Но
daughter
моя
is the
дочь
youngest with these
младшая
3
с тремя
granddaughters.
этими внучками,
One is
одной
2
2
years
года,
old,
другой
the
6,
other is
третий
6, the third
13,
is
14
13.
лет.
14 years
Слава богу,
old. Thank
14.
God,
Она
14.
выглядит
She looks like a pretty
достаточно
fucked up
замотанной
mom.
мамочкой. Почему?
Why?
Потому что
Because in the
В
modern world,
современном мире
the social world is
социальный мир
poorly designed
плохо
for raising
устроен
a
для
large number of
выращивания
children.
большого количества детей.
Bad. I'm
Плохо.
not talking
Я уж
about
не говорю про
finances.
финансы,
It's a bad
это
thing
само
by
собой
itself.
плохо.
A very small
Маленькие очень
allowance,
пособия,
low.
низкие.
I
Я считаю,
believe
что
that
каждая
every
женщина
woman should receive a
за
salary
каждого
for
ребенка
every
должна
child.
получать зарплату.
Here she has a child.
Вот у
She
нее
is
есть
raising him.
ребенок, она
She
его
should
растит,
receive
она
a
должна
salary.
получать зарплату.
Some kind
Какую-то
of minimum
минимальную
wage,
зарплату, но
but I
должна
have to get
получать,
it
потому что
because it's
это
labor.
труд.
Every child is
Каждый
like, you
ребенок
know, a machine.
это как, знаете,
Here she is a
станок, она
multitouch.
многостаночница. Но
Well,
почему
why does a machine
станочнику
operator get
платят
paid for
за то, что
making
он
some
какие-то
details,
детали делает,
but
а
women
женщине
don't
не
pay
платят
for
за то, что
making
она
people
делает
for
людей
society,
для
for the
общества, для
future?
будущего.
A
Такое
society
общество,
that
которое не
doesn't pay
платит
a
женщине,
woman is
обречено.
doomed. He
У
has
него
no
нет
future.
будущего.
Well, it means
Значит,
that our
правителям
rulers
нашим
practically do not need
будущее
the future.
практически не нужно. Но
But
декларации идут
declarations are coming,
какие-то
of
там
course.
помощи, значит,
Some
это
kind of
очень
help, I think,
слабая
is
помощь,
very
очень
weak.
слабое
The help is very weak,
идет,
in fact.
на самом деле,
The impact is coming.
воздействие.
But why
Но к
am
чему
I
это всё
telling all
рассказываю?
this?
Потому что
To the fact that this is very important.
вот, это очень важно.
In other
То есть без
words,
семьи,
without a
без
family,
семьи
without a
практически
family, almost culture,
культура,
nation,
нация,
state is
государство
doomed to
обречено на
disappear.
исчезновение.
It's only a
Вопрос
matter
только
of
времени.
time. Now
Теперь
let's
посчитаем,
calculate how
сколько
long it
нужно
takes for a family to
существования
exist for
семьи,
a
чтобы
long
она
enough time.
существовала достаточно долго.
In Russia, according to
В
statistics,
России, по
the average gap
статистике,
between
средний разрыв
childbirth
между
for a
родами у
woman is
женщин
4
4
years.
года.
3 children
ребенка
for
на
4,
4,
12
12
years
лет
of the
родового
birth
периода.
period. The average
Средний
age
возраст
of the
первых
first
родов
birth
20
is
лет.
20
Значит,
years.
20 лет плюс
So,
12
20 years plus
третьего
12 of the
ребенка
third child.
для того,
In order
чтобы
for Russia
Россия
not
не
to
выиграла,
win, a
женщина
woman must
должна
give birth
рожать где-то в
somewhere in
32
32
года.
years. Plus, we
Плюс
add
прибавляем
14 or
14 или
23
23
years.
года, мы
We get that
получаем,
in order to
что
grow
для
up.
того, чтобы
A
вырасти,
woman
еще
still
нужно
needs to
женщине
live to
дожить до
46 or 55
46-55
years.
лет.
So, in order
Итак, для
for
того,
our
чтобы
country
страна
not to
наша не
disappear,
исчезла, женщина
a
должна
woman
начать
should
рожать
start
в
giving
20
birth
лет,
at 20
а
years old
выпустить
and
последнего
release the
птенца
last chick
из
from the
гнезда
nest
в
at 55
55
years
лет.
old. It's not
Вот
for
неспроста
nothing
у нас
that at
55 лет
55
был
we had
такой
such a
вот
retirement
пенсионный
age for a
возраст, да,
woman.
для женщины.
So
Вот
she
она
released.
выпустила,
Then
дальше
she
она
voluntarily
как бы
becomes a
добровольно
grandmother,
становится
begins to
бабушкой,
deal with her
начинает
grandchildren,
заниматься уже
because, as a rule,
внуками,
young
потому что,
people
как
are not
правило,
up to
молодым
children
не до
almost.
детей
They
почти,
have to
они
make a
должны делать
career,
карьеру,
earn money,
зарабатывать деньги,
build a house
строить
there,
дом,
buy
там,
new
покупать
cars.
новые машины.
Children
Дети
for
для
them
них
are
это
weights on their feet,
гири на
in
ногах, по
fact,
сути
in this
дела,
regard.
в этом плане.
But that's why, as it
Но
were,
поэтому как бы
grandmothers are
бабушки
very
очень нужны.
necessary.
Поэтому
Therefore,
наше
our
советское
Soviet
государство было
state,
очень
it
мудро в
was
этом
very
плане,
wise in this
отпуская
regard,
женщин.
letting
Вот,
women go,
зная, что
knowing that a
женщина
real,
настоящая,
good,
хорошая,
kind
добрая,
woman will
никогда
never
не
leave her
оставит своих внуков
grandchildren
без присмотра,
unattended,
без
without
заботы.
worries. Here,
Вот. Таким
thus
образом,
up
до
to 55
55 лет.
years. So, it
Итак,
turns out that the
получается,
ideal
что
option
идеальный
for the
вариант для
survival of
выживания
society
социума
is a family
это
that should
семья,
begin with a
которая
woman
должна
from the age
начаться
of
у
20
женщины с 20 лет,
and
а
end
закончиться
almost in
практически
old
в
age,
глубокой
taking
старости,
into
с
account
учетом внуков и
grandchildren and
правнуков.
great-grandchildren. It turns
Получается,
out
что
that a
семья нужна на
family
всю
is
жизнь.
needed for life. Only a
Только
family for
семья
life
на всю
ensures
жизнь
the normal
обеспечивает
continuation of culture
нормальное
for
продолжение
centuries.
культуры в веках.
And
И
such
такие
families,
семьи,
I'm
я
saying
сейчас
now,
говорю,
for
например,
example,
вот то, что я
that what I
произнес, для
said will
многих
seem to many to be
покажется
some
каким-то
kind of
невероятным
incredible fantasy,
фантазерством,
such a
маниловщиной
mannerism,
такой,
utopia.
утопией.
However,
Однако
let's
вернемся
go
лет на
back
100 назад,
100
и мы
years
увидим,
ago,
что
and we will see that
95% нашего
95%
населения
of our peasant population
христианское.
lived in
Жило в
villages where
деревнях,
divorces
где
practically
разводы
did not
практически
exist.
не существовали.
Here is the story of
Вот
Grigory
история Григория
Melekov from The
Мелехова, так
Quiet
сказать,
Dawn. This is a
из
vivid
«Тихого
example of
дона».
how
Это
he
яркий
tried
пример
to
того,
leave
как
one.
он пытался из
From one
одной,
woman
от
to
одной
another,
женщины
how
уйти к
badly
другой,
it all
как это
happened,
плохо все
how badly it was
происходило, как это
perceived,
плохо
but there was
воспринималось, но там
such a
была такая
situation, a civil
ситуация,
war,
гражданская война,
where he
там все
got
это
away with it
сошло на
all.
срок.
In a
В
normal
нормальной
village,
деревне, как
as a
правило,
rule, there
уход
was
от одной
practically no
женщины к другой
departure from one
практически
woman
не
to another.
происходило.
They love each other,
Любят они
they don't
друг друга,
like
не
each other,
любят, они все
they
равно
still get used to
притираются,
it
начинают
and
жить
start living in the
в
village
деревне и
and lived
проживали
a long
долгую
life,
жизнь, оставляя
leaving a
большое
large
потомство.
offspring. 10
10
children.
детей, ну там,
Well,
может быть,
maybe half of
выживала
them
из них
survived,
половина, но
but
не
not the
суть.
point. The
Суть
bottom
в том, что
line
они
is that
жили
they
всю
lived
жизнь
all their lives
вместе,
together in the
в
same
одном
house.
доме.
It was a
Это была
family.
семья.
And
И
that is why
поэтому
Russia has
Россия
doubled in number
только с
from
1860 года до
1,860 to 1,900 to
1914-12
1,914
года
year,
выросла в численности в 2
60
раза.
million to
60 миллионов до
120
120
million
миллионов
people,
человек.
because there
Потому что
were
были семьи.
families. Well, the
Вот.
nobility
Ну,
had their
в
own way there,
дворянстве там
but
было
also in
по-своему,
the
но тоже в
nobility,
дворянстве, потому
because
что
there were no contraceptives.
контрацептивов
All
не было.
kinds of abortions were
Всякие
very
аборты были
life-threatening.
очень опасны
They
для
preferred to
жизни,
give birth,
предпочитали
and
рожать.
therefore, so
И
to
поэтому,
speak,
так сказать,
people, so
люди,
to
так
speak.
сказать,
Families had many
семьи были
children.
многодетными.
Here, for example,
Вот, например,
Dmitry
Дмитрий Иванович
Ivanovich
Менделеев,
Mendeleev,
тот, так сказать,
who,
он
in
там
my
то ли седьмой,
opinion,
то ли
is
12-й
either the
ребенок в
7th
семье,
or
там
the
чуть
12th
ли не
child in
младший,
the
там с
family,
трудом выжил, но
almost the youngest
выжил,
there,
дожил до
barely survived
своего
there, but he
знаменитого,
survived,
так сказать,
lived to his famous
состояния,
state, a
известного
world-famous
на весь мир.
chemist. Why
Я
am
к
I
чему это
saying
говорю?
this?
Потому что
To the fact that
семья
family is
—
not
это
just good.
не просто хорошо.
It's not
Это не
just
просто
moral.
морально.
This is
Это
the only thing that allows
единственное,
culture,
что
the state,
позволяет
and the nation to exist
нормально
and develop normally.
существовать и развиваться культуре, государству, нации.
The only thing is that there is no
Единственное. Замены
replacement
семьи
for the
нет.
family. If the
Если
state wants to
государство
live on,
хочет жить
it must
дальше, оно
take
должно
care of the
заботиться о
family as
семье как
itself
о
first of
самом
all.
себе в первую очередь.
Unfortunately, our state,
К
from my
сожалению,
point of
наше
view,
государство, с
I
моей
can
точки зрения,
criticize
я
it
могу
inside and
критиковать его
out,
вдоль и
but this
поперек,
is
но
not
это
an interesting
неинтересная
topic.
тема. Мы как бы
We
просто
sort of just
ставим
put an
точку в
end to
этом
this and
и
ask
спрашиваем
ourselves,
себя, а
but what
что
can
же
hold
может
to completely
удержать
different people with
два
different
совершенно
worldviews,
разных человека,
different
с разным
genders, this is
мировоззрением, разных
yin-yang,
полов,
these
это
are different
инь-янь, это разные
universes, different
вселенные, разные
cosmoses,
космосы. На
throughout their
протяжении
lives
всей
together,
жизни
in the same
вместе, в одной
apartment, in
квартире,
the same
в одной
room,
комнате,
in the
в
same
одном
house.
доме.
Here,
Вот.
imagine what a
Представляете,
long
какой
way
долгий
to
путь
go,
надо
but
пройти?
here I am,
Ну вот
for
я, например,
example. Almost
почти
all
всю
my
жизнь
life I
живу
live with
с
one
одним
person,
человеком и
and
знаю,
I
что
know
это
what it
такое.
is.
Вот.
As from the
Как
age of
вот
30
с
to
30 лет
70,
до
my wife
70-40
and
лет
I
мы
have been
живем с
living
моей
together
женой
for 40 years.
вместе.
I can
Я
say
могу
that this
сказать,
is work,
что
and we will
это
talk about it
труд,
a
и
little
мы об этом
more.
поговорим еще немножко.
But it is
Но
absolutely
это
impossible,
совершенно
from my
невозможно,
point
с
of
моей точки
view,
зрения,
without
без
love.
любви.
I believe
Я
that
считаю,
love
что
is the
любовь — это то
divine
самое
good that is
божественное
given to
благо,
people so
которое
that they
дано
can
людям
endure
для
this
того,
long journey
чтобы они
together.
смогли выдержать вот этот длинный, долгий путь вдвоем.
Because without
Потому что
love,
без
it is
любви это совершенно
absolutely
невозможно.
impossible.
Это
It's a nightmare.
кошмар и ад.
If there is
Если есть
love,
любовь,
it smooths
она
out all the
сглаживает
sharp
все острые
corners.
углы.
It, so to speak,
Она,
ennobles
так сказать,
all
облагораживает
relationships.
все отношения. Поэтому
Therefore,
любовь,
it turns out that love
получается, это
is the
тот
very
самый
necessary element for
необходимый
humanity
элемент
not to
для
disappear from the
того,
planet
чтобы
without a
человечество
trace.
не исчезло с планеты бесследно.
Let's talk
Поговорим о
about
любви
love a little
немножко.
bit. I've identified 5 levels
Я
of
тут
love
выделил
here.
5 уровней любви.
In
На самом
fact,
деле,
there are
есть
specialists who will
специалисты, которые
allocate not
будут
5,
выделять
but
не 5, а
55 levels.
55 уровней.
Someone will
Кто-то
say,
скажет, да это
yes,
все
this is
чепуха,
all
есть только
nonsense.
один
There
уровень.
is only one
Ну,
level.
неважно.
Well,
Это
it
моя
doesn't
схема.
matter.
Я
This is
буду
my
ее
scheme. I will
объяснять.
explain it. Let's
Начнем
start
с
from
самого
the lowest
низкого
level,
уровня,
from
физиологии.
physiology. Love gives
Любовь
us
дает
pleasure.
нам удовольствие.
Pleasure is
Удовольствие
sex. It's a
— это
beautiful
секс,
body.
это
It
красивое
smells.
там тело, это запахи.
People should be
Люди должны
pleasant
друг
to
другу
each
быть
other in all
приятны по
respects,
всем параметрам.
in
По
appearance,
внешнему виду,
in
по
smell,
запаху,
in
по
the
звуку
sound of their
голоса.
voice. Sorry
Извините
for the
за
details.
детали,
Even in
даже
bed
в
there should be
постели
pleasure.
должно быть удовольствие.
This is
Это
the obligatory
обязательный
foundation of this
фундамент
family
этого здания
building.
семьи.
If this
Если этот
foundation
фундамент
is not respected,
не
if people
соблюдается,
are unpleasant to each
если
other in
люди
bed,
друг другу
or
неприятны
it
в
seems to
постели,
them that the smell of
им
another
кажется, что
person is
запах
unpleasant
другого
to them,
человека им
then
неприятен,
everything else
то все
loses all
остальное
meaning
теряет
without this
всякий смысл
foundation.
без этого фундамента.
We rise a
Поднимаемся
little
чуть-чуть
higher.
выше.
The body,
Тело.
our
Наше
body,
тело,
our
наш
body needs
организм
what?
нуждается в чем?
It's about us
В том,
living.
чтобы мы
In order
жили.
to live,
Для
you
того,
need
чтобы
to
жить,
have a
надо
household.
иметь
You
хозяйство,
need to
надо
have a
иметь
kitchen.
кухню, надо
You need
иметь
to have a
женщину,
woman
которая
who will
приготовит,
cook.
надо иметь
You
мужчину,
need to
который
have a man
заработает
who will
деньги
earn money
на
for a
продукты,
product
которые
that a woman
приготовит
will
женщина.
cook. That is,
То есть
caring,
забота,
joint
совместное
creation of a house,
создание
apartment,
дома, квартиры,
arrangement, this is also
обустройства.
necessary.
Это тоже
If the
необходимо.
husband is lazy,
Если
a
муж лентяй,
parasite,
то не
does
явится,
not
ничего не
want to
хочет
do
делать, то
anything,
бедная женщина
then the
через
poor
некоторое
woman will
время
probably
найдет себе
find another
другого
person
человека,
after a
наверное.
while. At least,
По крайней мере,
it's
с таким
hard to
человеком
live with
трудно
such a
жить.
person.
Или,
Or
допустим, если
let's
женщина
say, if a
красавица,
woman is
прекрасная, но
beautiful,
не умеет
beautiful,
ничего
but
готовить,
does
и не
not
может,
know
так
how
сказать,
to
даже
cook anything and
там
cannot even
носки
wash
постирать,
socks, then
то
after a
мужчина через
while, a
некоторое
man
время,
will
так сказать,
grieve in
будет
anguish
в
and
тоске
overgrown with
горевать
dirt.
и
In other
зарастет
words,
грязью.
this
То
is
есть это
also
тоже
bad.
плохо.
That is,
То есть
the body needs
об
to be
организме
taken
надо
care of,
заботиться.
and
Это
this is care,
забота, это
this is
быт.
life,
И
and
бытом
life
надо
needs to be
заниматься.
dealt
И
with.
совместный быт
And living together
— это
is a
отдельная
separate song.
песня.
It's
Это
not a
уже
bed
не
anymore,
постель, это
it's a
другое
completely
совершенно
different
состояние,
state of
другие
other
заботы.
worries. Let's go even
Поднимемся еще
higher,
выше. И
and
тут
then
на
on the
третьем
third
уровне
level,
попадаем
we get into
в
a zone
зону,
that most
которую
people,
большинство
from
людей, с
my
моей
point
точки
of
зрения,
view,
не
do not
понимают.
understand. The essence
Суть
of
этой
this
зоны
zone
заключается в том,
is that
что
our life on
наша
this
жизнь на этой
planet,
планете,
it consists
она
not only of getting
состоит не
pleasure
только
or
из
success.
получения удовольствий или успеха.
Our life
Наша жизнь
consists in the
состоит в том,
fact
что
that
наша
our
душа
soul
должна
has to
чему-то
learn
научиться.
something. Throughout
На
our
протяжении
lives,
всей
we
жизни мы
learn.
учимся.
Why?
Почему?
Because studying.
Потому что учеба,
There is no development
без
without
учебы нет
study.
развития.
What is
Что такое
development?
развитие? Развитие — это
Development
приобретение
is the
новых качеств.
acquisition of new qualities.
А
And the
приобретение
acquisition
новых
of new
качеств
qualities is
— это
learning.
обучение.
I want to ride a bike.
Я
I
хочу
don't
ездить
know
на
how.
велосипеде,
I'm
я не
starting to
умею, я
learn.
начинаю
I don't
учиться.
know
Я
how
не
to
умею
shoot.
стрелять,
Let's
допустим,
say
из
with a
лука, я
bow.
хочу
I want
научиться,
to
я
learn. I
иду, я
go.
стреляю
I shoot
сначала
past
мимо, потом
first,
начинаю
then I
попадать.
start hitting. I
Я не
don't know
умею,
how to
допустим,
drive
там
cars
водить
there.
автомобиль,
Let's
я
say
сначала там
I first touch the garage
крыльями
door with
задеваю
my
ворота
wings
гаража,
there.
потом
And then
начинаю
I start
более-менее
driving
нормально водить,
more
потом
or less
становлюсь
normally. Then
профессионалом
I
почти
become a
вождения. То есть,
professional almost driving.
если мы
That
хотим
is,
развивать
if we
сами
want to
себя,
develop ourselves
а наша
and our
душа
soul
живет
lives
вечно, поэтому
forever,
нам надо
and
развиваться
therefore we
постоянно,
need
не
to develop
останавливаясь.
constantly,
Нам
without
необходима
stopping. We need to
учеба.
study. And the
И
question
возникает
arises,
вопрос,
And the study,
А
after all,
учеба,
how is it going?
она ведь как
The study
проходит?
takes place in such a
Учеба
way
проходит
that we
так,
always
что у
have,
нас
in
всегда
addition
есть,
to our
кроме
desire to
нашего
study,
стремления к
some other
учебе, еще
teachers who teach
какие-то
us.
учителя, которые
At
нас учат.
school,
В
we
школе
are
нас
taught
учат
by
учителя,
teachers,
в
at the
университете там
university by teachers,
преподаватели.
and in
А в
life.
жизни
In
нас
life,
учат
we are taught by
сотрудники, иногда
employees,
случайный
sometimes by a
человек на
random person
улице.
on the street.
Но
But
поскольку
since a
семья,
family, a
мужчина и
man and
женщина,
women live
живут
a long, long
долгую
life
жизнь по
according to
предыдущей
our
нашей
previous
версии
version
вместе,
together and live
и
close,
живут близко,
and
и
see
видят
through
друг
each
друга
other without
насквозь,
any
без всяких
embellishments, there
приукрас,
are no stronger and
то
wiser teachers for
нет
each other,
более
like a husband for a
сильных
wife,
и мудрых
and a
учителей
wife
друг у
for a
друга,
husband.
как муж для жены и жена для мужа.
And it
И
is
надо
necessary to
воспринимать
perceive each
и
other as
в
teachers in family
семейных
relations at
отношениях
the
на
third
третьих
level as
уровнях
well.
друг друга еще и как учителей.
And
И
thank you for
спасибо
every
говорить за
lesson we
каждый
teach
урок,
each
который
other.
мы друг другу преподносим.
Sometimes these lessons
Иногда
are
эти уроки
bitter,
бывают
sometimes they
горькими,
put
иногда
us
нас
in a
ставят в
corner,
угол, иногда
sometimes they
нас
can whip
могут
us for
выпороть
all
за
sorts of
всякие
nonsense.
глупости.
But this
Но
is
это
life.
жизнь.
Where can you get
Куда
away
ты от
from
этого
it?
денешься?
If you
Если
want
ты
to
хочешь
develop,
развиваться,
you will
ты
take
будешь
these
воспринимать
lessons.
эти уроки. А не
And
хочешь
if you
развиваться,
don't want to develop,
как
well,
говорил
as Jesus
Иисус
Christ said,
Христос, во
go
тьму
into
вечную
eternal darkness, you
отправляйся,
negligent slave.
нерадивый
Well,
раб.
I, for example,
Я,
strive to
например,
learn,
стремлюсь к
so,
обучению,
well, it's
поэтому
difficult.
трудно,
But,
но
well, what to
что
do?
делать? Зато
But then you
потом
get
удовольствие
pleasure
получаешь,
when you
когда
become
становишься
at
хоть
least a little
немножечко
bit
чуть-чуть
better.
лучше.
So, we passed the third one.
Итак, мы
And
прошли
what else
третий.
does the
А что
family
еще
give?
дает семья?
It
Она
also
еще
gives us
дает
the
нам
possibility of
возможность
genetic
генетической
infinity.
бесконечности.
The fact
Дело в
is
том,
that
что
our
наш
genes,
гены, наш
our
геном
genome determines our life,
определяет нашу
almost
жизнь
90%,
чуть ли не на
according to various
90%, по разным
estimates,
оценкам, от
from
70 до
70 to
90%.
90%. That is,
То есть мы,
when we leave
оставляя
children,
детей,
we
мы
leave
оставляем
offspring,
потомство,
we
мы
continue our kind of
продолжаем
eternity,
свой
and
род
then come back
вечности,
to
и
this
потом
ancestral
приходим
tree,
опять на это
as the
родовое дерево,
esotericists
как говорят
say.
эзотерики.
In
То есть
other
мы тем
words,
самым
we thereby
возделываем,
cultivate, so to
так
speak,
сказать, сад,
a garden,
куда
where
мы
we then
потом
return to this
возвращаемся в
garden.
этот сад. И если у
And
нас
if we
нет
don't have
детей, то
children,
нам
then
наша
our restless
неприкаянная
soul
душа
can
может
come
прийти
anywhere
куда
from
угодно.
someone else's, sit on someone else's tree.
На чужое
Some
дерево
kind
сесть,
of homeless,
бомжатское,
for
например.
example.
Ну,
Well,
кому-то
someone
хочется,
wants to let them flutter through the
пусть
trees.
порхают по деревьям.
And maybe
А
someone
кому-то, может
wants
быть,
to be
хочется все
among
время
their
быть
relatives,
среди своих
relatives with
близких,
ancestral
родовых,
roots of
с
people all
родовыми
the time.
корнями людей.
In this
В
case,
этом
it is
случае надо
necessary to deal with children.
заниматься детьми.
Well,
Ну, о
we
детях
just
мы
talked about
поговорили
the children.
только что.
Well, the
Ну и
last level of
последний
love
уровень любви
is
–
an
это
imprint on the
отпечаток на
soul,
душе,
an
на
eternal
вечном
imprint.
отпечатке. Дело в том, что
The
наша
fact
душа,
is that our
встречаясь
soul,
с душой
meeting with the
другого
soul of
человека,
another person,
она
it receives the
получает
effect of priding,
эффект
first
импринтинга,
of all,
во-первых,
an
отпечаток,
imprint.
во-вторых, так сказать,
And
это все равно
secondly, this
взаимодействие идет
interaction is
на
still
каком-то
going on at
тончайшем,
some subtle
божественном,
divine,
духовном
spiritual
уровне.
level. We
Мы
keep the imprint of
отпечаток
this
этого
person
человека,
with
с
whom
которым
we
мы
live
живем
for a
долго,
long
сохраняем
time,
потом
then we keep forever.
навечно.
No one
Уже
will ever
никто
erase the
никогда не
memory of that
сотрет
person with whom you lived
память
one
о
of your
том человеке,
lives.
с которым ты прожил одну из своих жизней.
And this
И
memory should be
эта память
useful and
должна
correct for
быть
us.
для нас полезной, правильной.
Therefore,
Поэтому
there are 5 levels of
5
love.
уровней любви.
Each of
На
these
каждом
levels
из
has
этих
its own
уровней
laws,
свои
its own
совершенно законы
concerns, and
действуют,
each of
свои
these levels
заботы.
needs care.
И каждый из этих уровней нуждается в уходе.
If you do
Если не
not take
ухаживать за
care of
этими
these
уровнями,
levels,
то
then the family
здание
building
начинает
begins to
разрушаться
collapse.
сильнее.
Well,
Ну
you
и
can end
можно
up, so to
закончить,
speak,
так сказать,
poetic like this.
поэтичным таким
There are
вот по
beautiful
поводу
statements
любви.
of the
Есть
Apostle
высказывание
Paul about love.
прекрасное апостола Павла.
This is the
Это
first Corinthian
первое послание
epistle from the
Коринфянам
New Testament.
из
I'm
Нового
going to read
Завета.
it
Я
out
сейчас
now.
зачитаю, это
This is a
известная
very
очень
well-known
фраза, она
phrase. It
постоянно
is constantly
используется, но
used,
все-таки она
but
здесь очень
still it is
уместна.
very appropriate here.
Если я говорю
If I
языками
speak with the tongues of
человеческими,
men and
ангельскими, а
angels,
любви не
I have
имею,
no
то я
love,
медь
then I
звенящая
have a
или
ringing
кимвал
or a sounding
звучащий.
cymbal. If I have
Если
the
имею
gift
дар
of prophecy
пророчества,
and
и
know
знаю
all
все
the mysteries,
тайны,
and have
имею
all
всякие
knowledge
познания
and
и всю
all faith,
веру,
so
так
that I
что
can
могу и
imagine
горы
mountains,
представлять, а
but
не
without
имею
having
любви,
love, then
то
I
я
am nothing.
ничто.
If I give away all my
Если я
possessions
раздам все
and give my
имение
body
мое,
to
и
be
отдам
burned,
тело мое на
I have no
сожжение,
love
а
for it.
любви не имею,
Then it is
то
of
мне
no
в
use
том
to me.
никакой
Love
пользы.
endures for
Любовь
a long time,
долготерпит,
is merciful,
милосердствует, любовь не
love does not
завидует,
envy,
любовь не
love does not
превозносится,
exalt
не
itself,
гордится,
is
не
not proud,
бесчинствует, не
does
ищет
not commit
своего,
outrages,
не
does not seek its own,
раздражается, не
does not
мыслит
get annoyed,
зла,
does
не
not think
радуется
evil, does
неправде,
not
а
rejoice in the truth,
сорадуется
but rejoices in the truth, covers everything, believes everything, hopes everything, endures everything. Love never ceases, although prophecies will cease, and tongues will be silenced, and knowledge will be abolished. This message, which is absolutely brilliant, speaks from the depths of centuries about the role of love in our world. Of course, family love is only a part of love for this world, but we consider hierarchy. So we sort of go to this level of generalized love, realizing that it has to do with family affairs. So, we have
Итак, мы
worked with you
проработали
on
с
two
вами два
levels,
уровня.
organizational and family.
Организменный и
We go to the
семейный.
third level.
Выходим на третий
Here I have
уровень.
the
Тут у меня,
truth,
правда,
indicated by the
обозначен
second,
вторым, но не
but not
суть.
the point. It's a
Это
job.
работа. Дело
The
в том,
fact
что
is that if family
если
used
раньше
to be a
семья
job for
для
peasants,
крестьян и
now
была
it is
работой,
not
то сейчас
so.
это не так.
A
Человек,
person is a family by
семья
family,
семьей,
life
бытом,
by
но
life,
человек так
but a
или иначе
person
идет
somehow
куда-то
goes somewhere
работать.
to work.
Он
He
может
can
идти в
go to
офис,
the
в банк,
office, to the
может идти,
bank,
так сказать,
he can go to the trucker, he can go to the workshop, to the
дальнобойщика,
machine.
может идти в цех, на
I conditionally
станку.
call it a
Я это условно
workshop.
называю цех.
This
Работает
workshop
цех.
works. In
В чем,
what laws
какие
are in
здесь
force
действуют
here?
законы?
Does
Действует
the
ли здесь
law of,
закон,
let's
допустим,
say,
той самой
that love
любви?
work here? It works,
Действует,
but the
но
law of
гораздо сильнее
justice,
тут
the
действует закон
regulator, acts
справедливости,
much more
регулятор.
strongly here. Why?
Почему?
The fact
Дело
is
в том,
that, let's
что
imagine the situation.
вот представим себе
Here we have a
ситуацию. Вот
workshop.
у нас есть цех.
There are
Цех, вот
workers
тут рабочие
depicted in the
люди, работают
workshop here.
одинаковые
The
люди,
same people
в
work
смысле
in the
одинаковые
sense of the same
специальности,
specialties.
специальность люди,
The
токаря,
turners' people work in the same
одинаковом
equipment,
оборудовании. И
and each
каждый
of
из
them
них
tries to
старается
make
сделать
some kind
какой-то
of their own
свой
output.
выработку.
And so
И вот
one,
один,
let's say,
допустим,
a
токарь за
turner
смену
makes
делает 100
100 parts
деталей,
per
а другой
shift,
делает,
and
допустим,
the other
50
makes,
деталей.
let's say, 50 parts.
И
And naturally,
естественно, что
the
тот, кто
one who
делает
makes
100 деталей,
100
будет в два
parts
раза больше
will earn
зарабатывать того,
twice
кто
as
делает
much
50
as the
деталей.
one who makes 50 parts. And that's
И
fair
это
enough.
справедливо.
The one who
Тот, кто
works more,
больше
the one who
работает, тот,
does
кто
more,
больше
or
делает,
rather, he
вернее,
should receive
тот и
more.
больше должен
This is the
получать.
law of
Это
justice.
закон
And
справедливости.
now imagine that we have included,
А
so
теперь
to speak,
представьте, что мы
the
на
principles
цеху
of love
включили,
in
так
the
сказать,
workshop.
принципы любви.
And the
И тот
person
человек,
who
который
made
сделал
50
50
parts
деталей, приходит
comes to the
начальнику
shop
цеха и
manager
говорит:
and says, Dear
уважаемый
boss,
начальник,
yes,
да,
I
я
made
сделал
50
50
parts,
деталей, но у
but I
меня
have a
семья, у меня
family.
5
I
детей,
have 5
у меня
children. My
жена там
wife is sick
приболела,
there. I
у
have
меня
problems there.
проблемы
I
там,
have
у меня
this,
то,
that,
все, другое,
another,
третье.
third.
Ну,
But you will pay
заплатите
me,
мне,
please,
пожалуйста,
the same
столько,
as the
сколько
turner
тому
who made
токарю,
100
который сделал
parts.
100 деталей.
I'm
Я вас
asking
очень
you very
прошу.
much. But if the
Вот
shop
если
foreman
начальник
makes
цеха
such
пойдет на
concessions
такие,
and
так сказать,
includes, so
уступки
to
и
speak,
включит, так
the
сказать,
love
фактор
factor,
любви,
then
то
justice will be destroyed.
разрушится
And the
справедливость. И
person
тот
who
человек,
made
который
100
делал
parts
100
will
деталей,
say,
скажет: а зачем я
Why
буду
will I restrain
упираться,
myself
делать 100
and make
деталей, когда
100
могу сделать
parts
50
when
деталей,
I can
прийти
make 50
поконючить, и мне
parts?
дадут
Come to poke,
такую
and
же
they will give me the same
зарплату. Ну, такой
salary.
примитивный
But such
достаточно
a
пример,
primitive example is
но этот
enough.
пример
But
действует
this
в
example
социуме
works in
вообще в
society
целом
in
для
general
каждого из
as a
нас.
whole
Мы
for each of
все,
us.
выходя на
We all
работу,
want to get more
хотим
when we
получать
go to
больше,
work. But at the
вот,
same
но
time,
при этом
we
мы
must
должны
also
и
produce more
производить
product,
больше
any
продукта,
product.
любого продукта.
It's
Это
information
информация,
or it's
или это
details,
детали,
it's some
это
kind of
какие-то, может
services,
быть, там
maybe there.
услуги.
And the
И
quality of these
качество этих
products should be
продуктов
high,
должно быть
and the
высоким, и
quantity should be
количество должно быть
large.
большим.
Then we will
Тогда мы
earn a
будем
lot.
зарабатывать много.
If this
Если этот
law is in
закон действует,
effect,
тогда
then
общество
society is
развивается,
developing and
работает
working
нормально.
normally.
А
And if
если
this law
закон этот
ceases to
перестает
work,
работать,
the principle of equalization
наступает
comes,
принцип
so-called,
уравниловки, так
then people
называемый,
lose
тогда
the
люди
incentive
теряют
to
стимул
work.
к труду.
They
Они
imitate the work that
имитируют
we had at
работу,
one time,
что мы
in
имели
Soviet
в свое
times,
время, в советское
especially
время,
in the
особенно в
Brezhnev
брежневский
stagnant
застойный
period.
период.
And then
И
the whole
тогда
state
все
suffers
государство
because
страдает,
everyone
потому что
starts
все
imitating.
начинают имитировать.
Doctors
Врачи
begin
начинают
to
имитировать
imitate treatment, teachers
лечение,
begin
учителя
to
имитировать
imitate training,
обучение,
and so on and so on.
так сказать, там, ну и так далее, и так
The
далее.
police
Милиция
begin
начинает
to
имитировать,
imitate
так сказать,
protection.
защиту,
Politicians
вот, политики
begin to
начинают
imitate
имитировать,
taking
так сказать,
care of
заботу
the
о
state.
государстве.
Why?
Вот, почему? Потому что
Because why
зачем, так сказать,
try?
там, стараться?
There are principles of
Есть принципы
equalization.
уравниловки,
That's all,
и
thank
все, слава
God.
Богу. Вот
But
если
if
там
there, on
на
this,
этом,
on the
на
third
третьем
level,
уровне,
at
на
the
уровне
level of the
цеха,
workshop,
не действуют
strict laws
жесткие
of
законы
justice do not apply to
справедливости
everyone according to
каждому по
work,
труду,
then work begins to
то
collapse.
труд
I'm
начинает
not going to go into this topic,
разрушаться.
because here you can
Я не
discuss
буду углубляться
endlessly,
в эту тему,
but this
потому
is
что
very
тут можно
clearly
дискутировать
manifested in the
бесконечно,
workshop.
но
Here
это
in the
очень
workshop,
явно
where the machine
проявляется в
operators
цехе,
are standing,
вот в
they are
цеху,
much weaker,
там,
or
где
rather,
станочники стоят,
it is
гораздо
more
слабее
difficult to
проявляется,
manifest in
вернее,
society
труднее
as a
проявляется
whole.
в целом в
Why?
социуме. Почему?
Because
Потому
the
что
jobs
работа
are
разная,
different, the
специальности
specialties
разные,
are
условия
different, the
разные,
conditions
станки
are different,
разные,
the machines are
регионы
different,
разные.
the regions are
Бывает так,
different.
что люди,
It
которые
happens that
делают
people who do
одинаковую
the same
работу,
job and
получают
get different
разные
money.
деньги.
We even
У
had
нас даже
such
были
northern
такие, так сказать,
allowances.
северные
When a
надбавки, когда
person
человек
left for
уезжал
the
на
north,
север, он
he
получал за
received
ту же
much more
самую
for the same
работу
work
гораздо
than he
больше, чем он
received in
получал в
Central
Центральной
Russia.
России.
But what was the
Но за
surcharge
что
for?
зарплата шла за
For the difficulties of life,
за
for the North it's
север, это
cold,
холод,
it
это,
was
так
poor
сказать,
nutrition there
плохое,
at
так
that
сказать,
time,
питание
let's
там
say
было в то
there.
время,
It's
допустим, там.
difficult working
Это тяжелые
conditions.
условия
For
для
this he
работы, за это он
received a
получал
certain
определенную
allowance.
надбавку, это было
That
тоже
was also
справедливо.
fair. And
И
these
вот эти
regulators
регуляторы
of justice
справедливости — это
are such a
такая сложная
complex
вещь,
thing
которая
that no big state,
ни
I
одно
think,
большое
will ever
государство, я
achieve
думаю,
absolute
никогда
justice.
не добьется абсолютной справедливости.
But it is
Но
impossible
невозможно
to
все
take
так
everything into
точно
account
учесть,
so accurately
чтобы
that each
каждый
person,
человек,
investing
вкладывая, так
different
сказать,
efforts,
разные
receives,
усилия,
depending on
получал в
these
зависимости
efforts,
от этих
what he
усилий
receives, he should
то, что
justly.
он получать должен по справедливости.
But if you
Но
don't do it at
если
all,
этим не
it will be
заниматься
even
вообще,
worse.
будет еще хуже.
In other words, justice must be dealt with daily, hourly, annually. It must be constantly changed and regulated. There must be regulators of justice, because even if there is a deviation of justice, but the people see that the state is striving for this justice, that it is trying to achieve this justice, it will forgive minor deviations. And if, let's say, the people see that the state does not care about justice, does not care at all, then this discourages people so much that they no longer want to work at all, because someone is offered to plow there for 8 hours for 20,000, for example, from morning to night. Then he turns on the TV, sees, so to speak, an oligarch doing nothing. He thinks that he is not doing anything. An oligarch is really hard work, I'll tell you. I was not an oligarch, but I know some oligarchs, they also plow. But how do they portray? They don't depict their work. They depict how they have fun, relax, how they consume some goods. And the hard workers who spend 8 hours in difficult conditions for 20,000, to see it is just a knife of the heart. He begins to be indignant, and he no longer wants to do his job honestly. And when he does not do his job honestly, because this is not only a hard worker, it can also be a teacher who starts to teach children badly from resentment. It can make the doctor stop working well too. In other words, there are doctors who will work well at any salary. Well, there are 20% of people there who will fulfill their duty regardless of anything, but the rest will also be drivers by this. What happens? It turns out that doctors begin to treat poorly, teachers treat poorly, teachers treat poorly, drivers drive poorly, workers do poorly, and we get a state in which everything becomes absolutely disgusting. So, well, I think the oligarchs think something like this. They think, well, God be with him, with this state. We will buy everything for ourselves abroad. Sometimes it turns out that they urgently get to our domestic hospitals. And there some doctor can do such a thing to their health that they can think about justice already belatedly. But these are all the conversations I'm having right now. They're actually, in general, the eye of a crying man in the desert, beating his forehead against the wall. Why? Because talking can't fix the situation. This is simply a statement of the fact that we do not have the kind of justice that was in the Soviet Union. There were some problems with justice, but still there was more of it. So, about justice. What about the laws of love, which, so to speak, are declared in the New Testament, and the laws of justice? They contradict each other. This is very clearly explained by the parable of the talents, and again by the Testament of Matthew, the 25th chapter. Let me remind you what the essence of this parable is for those who have forgotten it or have never read it. The master went on a journey and left each of his slaves, workers, a different amount of money. The most capable, 10 talents. Talent was then a monetary measure, time in Israel. The average one has 5 talents there. But he left 1 talent for the weakest one and said, "You should multiply these talents. In other words, I will return, and you have to give me back as much talent as possible." He went back and found that the one to whom he had given 10 had given him back 20. The one to whom he had given 5 had given him back 10. And here comes the last one. He gave him 1. And the one who received 1 talent came up and said, "Sir, I knew you that you were a hard man. You reap where you sowed, and gather where you didn't scatter. And being afraid, you went and hid your talent in the ground. Here's yours for you." The master answered and said to him, "You are a crafty slave and lazy. You knew that I was sowing where I didn't sow, and I was gathering where I didn't scatter. Therefore it behooved you to give my silver to the merchants, and I, having come, would have received mine with profit. Therefore, take from him a talent, and give to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has it will be given and multiplied. But to him who does not know how, even what he has will be taken away. But cast out the worthless slave into outer darkness. There will be a cloak and gnashing of teeth." Think about this parable. Where is the love for one's neighbor, caring for a person, right? There is a pure law of justice here, pure as a tear. If you are lazy, then according to the laws of justice, the last one will be taken away from you. they will
от него
send you into outer
последнее,
darkness,
а тебя
and you
отправят
will
во
cry
тьму.
and gnash
Внешне
your
будешь
teeth
ты
there.
плакать и скрежетать зубами.
It's written
Это
in the New
написано в
Testament.
Новом Завете.
This is the
Это
parable of
притча
Jesus Christ.
Иисуса Христа.
Those who
Вот
forget
те,
about
кто
this
забывают
parable
об
should
этой
remember
притче,
it, because there is
должны
no other
ее
way in this
вспомнить,
world.
потому что по-другому в этом мире не бывает.
Lazy people very
Лентяи
rarely get something
очень
good out of
редко
life.
получают от жизни что-то хорошее.
In
На
fact,
самом деле
even people
даже
who look like loafers and
люди,
so
которые
on and
выглядят
so
как
forth are an
бездельники
external
там,
game.
и так далее, это
In
внешняя игра.
fact,
На самом
any
деле
person,
любой человек,
in
чтобы
order
добиться
to achieve
успеха,
success,
там, даже
even
вот,
great success
большого
and big
успеха,
money,
больших денег,
he
он
must
должен
plow,
пахать,
plow,
пахать,
plow,
пахать,
and
пахать.
plow. No one can
Без
easily
труда,
pull a fish
рыбку
out
из
of the
пруда не
pond.
вытащит никто.
Well, their
Ну, там
children
дети
can
могут,
get
так
some
сказать,
big
получить
inheritance from
наследство
their
от
parents,
родителей какое-то
but then
большое,
this
но потом
inheritance
это
can
наследство
turn out
может
to be a
оказаться
stone
камнем
around
на
their
шее,
neck,
который тянет
which will
на
drag
дно
them to the bottom of a river or the
реки или
sea.
моря.
But this is
Но
a
это
separate
отдельная тема.
topic. So, we have
Итак, мы с
finished
вами
considering the three
закончили
levels.
рассмотрение
We
трех
are
уровней,
moving on to the
переходим на
third,
третий, то
that
есть
is,
четвертый
the fourth
уровень.
level.
Это
This is the
рынок.
market. Is that what's
Вот
going on?
что происходит.
Here in this
Вот на
picture
этом,
shows
на этой
such a
картинке
collective farm
показан такой
market.
колхозный
But
рынок.
in
Но на
fact,
самом деле
our whole state, the whole
все
world
наше
is a single
государство, весь
market.
мир — это единый
Why?
рынок. Почему?
Because
Потому что все,
everything
что
that
мы
we have
сделали
done
на
at
работе
work,
в цеху,
on the shop floor,
все потом
everything
попадает на
then
этот
gets to
рынок и
this
там
market
продается.
and is sold
Так
there. Isn't that right? Well,
Ну,
everything we do,
все, что мы
everything has to
делаем,
be sold somewhere,
все где-то
unless, of
должно быть
course,
продано.
it is a state
Если это,
defense
конечно, не
order,
гособоронзаказ.
and everything else has to
А
be
все
sold.
остальное должно быть
We made a
продано.
good car,
Сделали
it
мы
will be bought
хороший
with
автомобиль.
pleasure.
Его
A
купит с
bad
удовольствием.
one,
Плохой
it is
его купит
unlikely to buy it.
вряд ли.
Isn't
Так
that
ведь?
right? We have grown a
Вырастили мы
large,
крупную,
beautiful, fleshy strawberry.
красивую
They will
клубнику,
buy it from us with
мясистую, ее
pleasure.
купят нас с
And if it
удовольствием.
is
Если она будет
crooked,
кривая,
rotten,
гнилая,
so
так
to
сказать,
speak, and
вообще
so
никто не
on,
купит.
and no one will buy it at all.
И при этом
And
на
at the
этом
same
рынке
time, in
абсолютно
this market,
всем,
absolutely
по
everyone,
большому
by
счету,
and large,
наплевать
does
на
not
то,
care how
сколько ты
much work you
труда
have
вложил,
invested in your
вот в
product,
свой
what kind
продукт,
of family you had,
какая у
big
тебя
or
была
small,
семья, большая или
whether you loved your
маленькая,
loved ones
любил
or
ли ты
not,
своих
whether
близких
you
или не
cared about your
любил,
health or not. It's
заботился ты
all
о своем
completely
здоровье,
of no
не
interest to
заботился, это все
anyone.
совершенно никого не
Here
интересует.
you
Вот
come
вы
to the
приходите на
market
рынок
and
и
see,
видите, вот стоит
here is a
женщина
middle-aged woman who
средних лет,
sells, let's say,
которая
beautiful.
продает,
Here
допустим,
you can see
прекрасные,
oranges
видно,
or
там,
tomatoes
апельсины
or
или там помидоры или
cucumbers at the
огурцы по
same
одной
price.
цене.
And there is
А рядом
another woman
женщина стоит
standing next
другая,
to her who is
которая
older than her,
постарше ее,
for
например,
example,
которая то
who
же самое
sells the
продает
same
в 2
thing
раза
for
дороже.
twice as much. And you ask
И
her,
вы
which is more
спросите
expensive
ее,
to
которая
sell,
дороже
why
продает,
do you
а
have
чего у
such
вас
high
цены
scenes?
такие высокие?
Why do you
Почему
want to sell more
вы
expensive
тут
here?
хотите продать дороже?
It's unclear.
Непонятно.
She'll say,
Она
and you
скажет, а вы
know, I
знаете, у
have a
меня
big
семья
family.
большая.
We love each other. We take
Мы
care of
друг
each
друга
other.
любим,
I
заботимся. Я
recently
недавно
bought a gift
подарок
for
купила
my
внукам.
grandchildren.
Теперь,
Now,
чтобы
in
этот
order to
подарок
return
вернуть,
this
мне
gift,
нужно заработать
I need
много
to earn
денег,
a lot of
поэтому я
money,
хочу продать
so
это
I
все
want to
гораздо
sell
дороже.
cucumbers for twice as much.
Вот
Here I am just
я
giving such
просто
a
такой
fantastic
фантастический
example.
пример
In
привожу. На
fact,
самом деле
this never
это
happens.
никогда не происходит.
People
Люди
just
просто
walk
ходят по
around the
рынку и
market
выбирают,
and
где
choose where they
можно
can buy
купить
something better and
что-то
cheaper.
покачественнее и
The
подешевле.
price-quality
Соотношение
ratio
цена-качество
is the
решающим
deciding
фактором
factor
является
for
для
the
покупки.
purchase. And
И
everyone is
всем
absolutely
абсолютно
indifferent to who
безразлично,
stands in front of
кто
you as a
стоит перед
seller.
тобой как продавец.
A loving wife
Любящая
or not
жена или
loving,
не
caring
любящая,
about her health or not
заботящаяся о
caring.
своем здоровье или не заботящаяся.
How long she
Сколько она
worked in her
работала в
garden
своем
there.
огороде,
We
там,
were
на
in her
своем
vault,
саду,
or maybe
или
it
вообще,
didn't
может,
work
не
at all.
работала.
We are no
Это
longer
нас
interested in this
вообще
at
не
all.
интересует.
And
И
that's
это
right.
правильно.
Because
Потому
if
что
we
если
chose
бы
not
мы
according to the
выбирали не
criteria
по
of market price of quality,
критерию рыночному
but according to the
цена-качество, а по
criteria of
критериям
love,
любви, справедливости и
justice, and
заботы о себе,
self-care, then our common
то
society,
наш
it would
общий
quickly degrade
социум,
and
он
eventually
бы
come
быстро
to a primitive
деградировал, в
communal
конце концов
system.
пришел к первобытному общинному строю.
Because the
Потому что
market is a
рынок
competition.
это конкуренция.
Competition between different
Конкуренция
manufacturers.
между различными
And
производителями.
if there is no
И если нет
competition,
конкуренции,
as we
мы это
discussed in a
рассматривали
previous
в предыдущей
conversation
беседе
about
про
the biological
биологический мир,
world, then the
биологический мир
biological world
деградирует и
degrades
вымирает.
and dies out. In the
Точно
same way,
так же, если
if
нет
there is no
конкуренции,
competition,
деградирует и
the
вымирает
social
социальный мир.
world degrades, dies
И,
out.
кстати, яркий
And, by
пример
the way,
такой
a vivid
деградации и
example
вымирания —
of
это
such
брежневские
degradation,
застойные времена,
extinction,
когда
is the
перестали
Brezhnev stagnant
производить много,
times,
так сказать, товаров,
when they
но
stopped producing a
из-за
lot of
социальной
goods, but because
справедливости,
of social
из-за
justice,
заказов,
because
из-за
of orders,
плановой
because of a planned
экономики.
economy. Most
Большинство производителей было
manufacturers
абсолютно
didn't give a
наплевать,
damn about
какого
the
качества
quality
они
of their
делали
stuff.
свои вещи.
We
Мы
remember
помним
these
эти
ugly
уродливые
shoes,
ботинки, эти
these
ломающиеся
domestic
каждую
cars
неделю
breaking
машины,
down every week, these
отечественные,
non-working
так
cranes,
сказать,
these
неработающие
crooked
там
walls of
краны,
houses, and so
вот,
on,
это,
so
так
on,
сказать,
so on.
кривые стены домов и прочее, прочее,
In other
прочее. То
words,
есть, несмотря на
despite the
то
complacency that we had in
благодушие,
the
которое
stagnant
было у нас
in the 80s,
застойные
the
80-е
quality
годы,
gradually decreased.
качество постепенно снижалось,
Decreased.
снижалось, снижалось.
I
Я сам
myself
работал на
worked in
производстве и видел,
production and
как
saw how
это
it
все
all really
происходит
happens in
реально на
production.
производстве.
There was
Рынка
practically
в
no
Советском
market in the
Союзе
Soviet
практически
Union.
не было.
The salary was a
Зарплата
living
это было
allowance.
пособие на жизнь.
Almost no
Никто почти
one
не
depended
зависел
on the
от
results of their
результата своего
work.
труда.
Almost
Почти
nothing
ничто не
depended on the
зависело от
quality
качества
of the product
производимого
produced.
продукта.
Everything
Все
was bought with
покупалось
the state,
государством, все
everything was
перераспределялось,
redistributed,
и
and
огромные
Aaronic
траты были
spending was completely
совершенно
ineffective.
неэффективные.
This is
Вот
why
поэтому
the
Советский
Soviet
Союз
Union,
отчасти
partly
поэтому,
for
в том
this
числе
reason,
поэтому, с
including
моей точки
from
зрения,
my point of view,
он
it
себя
exhausted
исчерпал при всем,
itself
так сказать,
with
уважении
all
к
due respect for
достижениям,
the
которые были
achievements
там,
that were there,
вот, и
and ended
закончился,
with the
так
years
сказать,
of
годами
perestroika.
перестройки,
Then
потом
Yeltsin's these
ельцинскими
perturbations and our time.
пертурбациями и нашим временем.
Right now,
Вот
I
сейчас я
think the
думаю,
market is
что
acting,
рынок
working.
действует, работает.
We go
Мы
first of
идем в
all
первую
to
очередь
buy
покупать
foreign devices,
иностранные
things,
девайсы,
computers,
там,
cars.
вещи,
We
компьютеры,
try.
машины стараемся, да?
They are
А не
domestic
отечественные,
because, with
потому что
all
при
due
всем
respect to
уважении
our
к нашим, так
compatriots,
сказать,
we still want
соотечественникам, мы хотим
high-quality
все-таки
things.
качественных вещей.
And if we see
И
a
если мы
quality
видим
product on the
качественный
market
продукт на
that
рынке,
costs
который
less,
стоит
we will
дешевле, мы
take
его
it.
возьмем.
Even if this product is
Даже если
made,
этот
let's
продукт
say,
сделан,
they're in
допустим, там, в
Israel.
Израиле.
By the
Я вот,
way, I
кстати,
really like
очень
Israeli
люблю
dates.
израильские финики.
They are
Они
very
очень дорогие,
expensive, about
около 1000
1,000
рублей.
rubles.
Но,
And
знаете,
you
один
know,
финик в
I
день
eat one
съедаю,
date a day,
и
and I
я
get
получаю
such
такое
pleasure, right?
удовольствие, да?
That's how much
Вот.
I don't get
Сколько я
from
не
20
получаю от
dates
20
of
фиников
cheaper
более
quality
дешевого
from
качества
some
из
other
какой-то другой
country.
страны.
These
Вот.
are dates
Вот
from
это из
Israel.
Израиля финики.
If
Если
someone
кто-то мне
brings me
привезет,
dates
так
from the
сказать,
Ryazan
из
region,
Рязанской области
here,
финики,
much cheaper,
вот,
but less
гораздо
high
дешевле,
quality,
но
I will not
менее
buy them.
качественные, я их
This
покупать
is
не
the market.
буду. Это
And
рынок.
each of us goes around the store
И
and
каждый из
constantly
нас
chooses the
ходит по
market for
магазину и
himself.
постоянно
And
по
this is
рынку
constantly
выбирает
being
себе, и
regulated.
это
There is
постоянно идет
feedback.
регуляция,
The
идет обратная
manufacturer
связь.
begins to
Производитель
understand what
начинает
he needs to
понимать,
do,
что
what
ему
not
надо
to do.
делать, что не надо
I'm going
делать.
to
Я
make
сейчас
a little
небольшую рекламу
advertisement right
сделаю.
now.
Я
I
думаю,
think
что
we
у нас
don't
не
have an
рекламный канал.
advertising channel.
Долгое
For a
время
long
мы с женой не
time,
могли
my
найти
wife and I could
хороших
not find good
продуктов в
products in
магазинах,
stores until the
пока не
network of
открылась
Taste
сеть
Villas
«Вкусвилл».
opened. I can't say that
Не могу
everything
сказать,
is
что во
perfect in the
«Вкусвилл»
taste of the
есть
villas. I
все
would have made a lot of
идеально. Я бы
complaints
им
about the
там
quality of some
кучу
products there.
претензий предъявил по
But in
качеству
general,
там
I want
некоторых
to tell you,
продуктов. Но
this
в
is a
целом,
dream.
я вам хочу
Finally,
сказать,
Oshi
это
has come
мечта
true.
наконец наша
We buy
сбылась. Мы
semi-finished
покупаем
products.
полуфабрикаты,
There's some
там
minced
какой-то
rabbit
фарш
or something
кроличий или
else.
еще что-то.
The wife makes
Жена
cutlets.
делает
She
котлеты.
doesn't
Ей
have
не
to
надо
cut up this
разделывать
fish.
эту
There she
рыбу, там
stands in the
стоять
kitchen
на
for
кухне
hours,
часами,
bending
там
down there,
нагибаясь, надрывая
straining her
свою
back.
спину.
And we are
И
happy
мы
to
с
go to the
удовольствием
store.
ходим в этот магазин.
Yes,
Да,
the
цены
prices
там
there are more
повыше,
than in
чем пятерочки, но
Pyateroshka, but the
качество там
quality there is
заметно
noticeably better.
лучше. И
And as a
в
result,
результате сумма
the amount of
энергии,
energy
которую мы
we receive
получаем,
is worth
стоит ровно
exactly the
столько.
same.
То есть
That
можно съесть
is,
большую
you can eat
курицу,
a
так
big
сказать,
smoked
копченую
chicken
где-то там,
bought somewhere
купленную
in some kiosk
в
there,
каком-то там
and after half
киоске.
an hour,
И через
you want
полчаса
to eat
опять
again.
захотите есть, а можно
And you
купить
can buy a
небольшой
small
кусочек. То
piece,
есть 2
eat 2
котлетки
cutlets.
съесть, вот
Here's the taste of
вкусвилловских,
the villa,
например.
for example.
Вот я думаю, что
And here I
вкусвилл
think that
услышит
the
мою
taste of the
лекцию,
villa
меня
will hear
премирует
my
какой-нибудь
lecture, and I
котлеткой
will
за это.
award some cutlet for this.
Вот.
That's it.
Да.
So we
Итак, мы с
ourselves
вами
stopped at the
остановились
fourth
на
level in the
четвертом
market.
уровне. На
And we
рынке.
see
И
that
мы
there is a
видим, что
market here,
здесь, на
and
рынке,
it has become a
а он
global
стал
one.
мировым.
Many people
Вот
do
это
not
многие не
understand
понимают,
that
что
it is
сейчас
impossible to
невозможно
close off
закрыться от
from the
мирового
world
рынка
market
и
now.
конкурировать
And
надо
our modern
современному нашему
domestic
отечественному
manufacturer
производителю
should
не с
compete not with
соседом
neighbor Vasya or
Васей
with
или
some
не с
state-owned
каким-то там
enterprise of
государственным
another city,
предприятием другого
but it is necessary to compete with
города,
the whole
а
world,
конкурировать
with the
надо со
Americans,
всем миром,
with the
и с
Germans, with the
американцами, и
Chinese,
с
and with
немцами,
the
и с
Koreans,
китайцами, и с
and with
корейцами,
anyone.
и с кем угодно.
And what I say will seem
И
to
то, что я
many,
говорю,
but it's
многим
easy for him
покажется,
to say,
ну, легко
but
ему
it's not
говорить. Да
easy for me
нелегко
to
мне
say.
говорить. Я с
I have been
95-го
producing
года,
diamond tools for 25
25
years,
лет
since I
произвожу
was
алмазные
95,
инструменты, и
and we
внутри
compete within
России мы
Russia.
конкурируем.
At first,
Сначала мы
we
конкурировали
competed
только
only
с
with the
немцами, потом
Germans,
появились
then the Koreans
корейцы,
appeared,
потом
then the
появились
Chinese
китайцы
appeared in our
на
market.
нашем рынке.
And
И
Chinese
китайский
tools are
инструмент
getting
становится все
better,
лучше,
better,
лучше, лучше
better
с
every
каждым
decade,
десятилетием,
every
даже
5
с
years.
пятилетием, даже с
Even
каждым
every year
годом.
they produce cheap
Они
diamond
производят
tools,
дешевые
the
алмазные
quality of which
инструменты,
is growing
качество
higher and
которого
higher
растет
and
выше и
higher.
выше и выше.
And I have
И мне
too.
приходится,
I'm
я
sitting here in the
живу себя
Konakovsky
в
district,
Конаковском
in the
районе,
village of Selikovo,
в деревне Селихово,
the wilderness,
глушь,
the Russian hinterland.
российская глубинка.
We have a small
У нас
company,
небольшое
but we
предприятие.
constantly monitor the
И Но мы
situation,
постоянно
what
мониторим
big companies
ситуацию.
are doing
Что
in
делают в
America,
Америке?
what they are doing in
Крупные
Germany,
компании.
such as
Что
Sean,
делают в
let's say
Германии,
they're
такие как
here
Шон,
or in
допустим,
Gen.
там,
What are the
вот,
Chinese
или
doing?
Евген. Что
Why
делают
are we
китайцы?
competing?
Почему
Because when we
конкурируем?
come to
Потому
the
что когда мы
factory
приходим на
and
завод
offer our tools,
и
they
предлагаем
say,
наш инструмент,
but
они
we bought
говорят, а вот
cutters
мы
from
купили у
Sean.
Шона
They are
фриз.
the same price as yours, but
Они
they are
вот такой
German.
же цены,
I
как
say,
ваши, но они
well, what
немецкие.
if they
Я
are
говорю, ну
German,
что они
but ours are
немецкие, а
better?
наши лучше?
And
А
how do you
как вы
prove
это
it?
докажете? А вы
And look at you.
посмотрите.
And
И
they
они
put
ставят на
stops and
столок и
yes,
говорят, да,
our
наши
cutters are
фрезы
better than the
лучше
German ones.
немецких. Они очень
They are very
удивляются, как
surprised.
это
How
может
can this
быть.
be?
А я
And I
говорю, да если бы
say,
так не было,
yes, if
давно
it
бы
hadn't been
закрылся.
so and would have been closed long ago.
Вот мое
Here is
маленькое
my little
крошечное
tiny
предприятие
enterprise
на
on the
краю
edge of the village.
деревеньки,
It competes
оно
now with the
конкурирует
whole
сейчас со
world
всем
with
миром.
English instruments. We have recently entered into a competitive struggle with an American. We are constantly competing with the Italians, with the French. Now the fight has started competitively. I'm not talking about the Koreans, the Chinese, who have flooded the entire diamond tool market. And all the time, every year they throw out something new and new and new. And we have to react, develop these new tools, go out. This is a battle. This is a battle of competitive males for a large female, which is called the market.
Большую такую самку, которая называется рынок.
If this competitive struggle does not exist, development becomes, and humanity will be mired in stagnation, degradation, and will perish without development. Therefore, we need a market, we need competition. And I repeat again, no one cares about consumers at all. Do I have justice there, at my enterprise, or there is none there? They absolutely don't care what kind of family man I am. They don't care how I take care of my health. I don't care. It is important for them that our tool is cheaper and works better. That's the only thing that works here, at this level. So keep in mind that there is also this level, and it works for the absolute good of evolution.
И он работает на абсолютное благо эволюции.
Well, now we have worked through almost all the levels and are rising to the highest level, which has a mystical essence. This is the level of the highest social expediency. This is a mysterious level that we are going to focus on a little bit now. Well, finishing with competition, I can say that I have come to the conclusion that there is nothing worse than a monopoly for evolution, and therefore for the absolute good of the world, because any monopoly on the production of cars, on ideology, on ideas, on some kind of political power, well, here I can make an exception, because it's a separate topic. For any product, intellectual, creative, spiritual, material,
духовный, материальный,
any monopoly on any of these levels, on any of these areas, is the most important evil in this world.
Это самое главное зло в этом мире.
Because monopoly stops development, it stops evolution.
Развитие, она останавливает эволюцию.
And as we remember, evolution is the only absolute good in our universe.
Абсолютное благо нашей Вселенной.
And monopoly is a stop evolution.
Это стоп-эволюция.
This is the killing of the absolute good.
Убийство абсолютного блага.
This is death to the absolute good. That's what a monopoly is. Therefore, there should be competition, but it should be fair.
Но она должна быть справедливой.
Well, we have finished, and now we are rising to the level of the fourth, the highest expediency. Very many people perceive the highest expediency often as an accident. We are going to look at all of this now. So let's start with an example like the Titanic. We all know this film and remember how women and children were put in the boat first of all, while men stood doomed to perish on board the Titanic. And no one even asked at that moment, aren't men people or something? Why are women and children saved, but men are not saved? Where is justice here, generally speaking? She's not here. Yes, there is no justice here, and there is no love for men. They would have cast lots, at least there was some justice. Women and children. And why? And there is a higher social expediency. The fact is that women are a factor limiting the population. One woman can leave offspring for a maximum of 10 children, 3 children. And a man can, excuse my bluntness, impregnate 100 women. Therefore, it is more important for a society that wants to develop and increase its number. Women are more important. I want to say right away, it wasn't always like that. There were times in China, in the Arab world, and, in my opinion, in Russia, I heard, there were times when women, on the contrary, were second-class people. And moreover, there were times when newborn girls were simply killed so that there would be no increase in numbers. And where is justice here? Where is love here when a newborn girl is killed? No, nothing. It's just that the social world is so arranged that there is a higher expediency. Is it bad or is it good? I am not a judge by this law. I just describe them as an observer. There are laws. I'm talking about them. So, there was a clear injustice on the Titanic. Why were children rescued? It is clear that the child still has many days of life ahead of him. He can leave offspring and bring more benefits than an old man. Is that clear? It's more valuable. Therefore, children and women are saved first of all. This is the highest expediency of the simplest level. Let's take another example. This is the history of the Churchills of the city of Coventry. During the war, the Germans planned an airstrike on the city of Coventry. The bombers were flying from Germany, and the Enigma decryption system, in my opinion, it was called by the British, gave them information about this upcoming raid. Churchill was informed that the Germans were flying, who wanted to bomb the city. Here. And Churchill had two choices. The first choice is to declare an alarm, raise, so to speak, all residents, evacuate them from the city, save them. But at the same time, he understood perfectly well that the only source was this system of decrypting secret German codes. The Germans would then guess that their system had been discovered. They will change it, and then the British will go blind in their struggle with the Germans and stop seeing what they want. And many more people will die, and maybe even England will lose the war. And Churchill makes a decision. He decides not to warn the residents of Coventry about the upcoming raid. It's a cruel decision. The anti-human, cannibalistic decision was made by Churchill during the war. Planes flew in, bombed, people died, though not so many, but residents died. The question is, were these people guilty of something? Didn't they work poorly in their factories? No, they worked well in factories. They were wonderful family men. There was love there. They took care of themselves. In other words, they did not violate any social law, and still they fell victim to some higher incomprehensible expediency. Every resident of Coventry could cry out to heaven and say, Lord, for what? And the answer would be for him, not for anything. That is, he was not personally to blame for the fact that he died. There was no personal fault of his, but there was a social necessity. And this social necessity was perfectly understood by all the commanders of Ivan, who sent penal battalions to certain death, who made reconnaissance of battle, who went 4 languages almost to certain death of scouts, who sent and so on. And so on, and so on. Without conscious, meaningful sacrifices, the war cannot be won. Those who believe that this is so are very naive people who would have lost everything that could have been lost very quickly during the war. When a society gets into a war, and humanity, as we know, is almost 90% of its time, if not more, is in a state of war, there are such strict laws, even cruel laws, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it just needs to be understood. I personally can't accept this personally. I am an ordinary man in the street who is outraged by Churchill's decision. But my consciousness understands the expediency of this decision and takes it at the highest level. Yeah, well, okay, that's sorted out. Now Pompeii. That's where, by chance or not by chance, all the inhabitants of Pompeii died. That they are to blame for the volcano exploding. Or there was a flood there recently. 250,000 people died from the tsunami. Are they to blame for the tsunami that hit? Chance or supreme expediency? We don't know. Is the death of Atlantis an accident or a supreme expediency? We don't know. But the death of the Roman Empire, I think, is not an accident. It is the highest expediency. And we know perfectly well that the New Testament describes the apocalypse, in the process of which a huge number of people will die, and the whole world will perish. And there will be saved 144,000, in my opinion only, who will pass into the kingdom of heaven. See, it's in the New Testament. In the New Testament, where it is written about love, about caring, about compassion. It is written that all the same, despite love, compassion, justice, despite all the talents, the apocalypse awaits us all. You are like the highest expediency. What is the ultimate expediency of the apocalypse? I think everyone will give himself an answer. I gave myself an answer to this topic. I gave lectures about the transformation of humanity with this. I have a book being written on this topic now. In other words, there is a higher expediency, and the only thing that should comfort us in this regard, from my point of view,
тот
is
факт,
the
что наша
fact
душа
that our
живет
soul
вечно.
lives forever,
И наше
and our
воплощение на этой
incarnation
земле
on this earth will
не
not be the
последнее.
last. And the main
И
thing
главное
is
с
to live
достоинством
with
прожить
dignity
все,
everything
что
that this fate
уготовано
has in
тебе этой
store for
судьбой.
you. Here, well,
Ну,
as
как бы,
the last question, the
как
final one.
последний вопрос завершающий.
Of course,
Я
I
затянул,
dragged
конечно,
out my conversation
свою
to an
беседу
incredible
до
extent, but I got
невероятных
carried away.
размеров, но
The
увлекся.
topic is very
Тема очень
interesting,
интересная,
new.
новая.
It's
Я
almost the
практически
first
первый раз
time
ее
I
так
explain it so
расширенно
extensively.
объясняю.
That's why it's taken so
Поэтому уж так
long.
долго.
And how to combine
А как
instincts,
соединить
love,
вместе
fair
инстинкты,
market
любовь,
laws, and
справедливость,
supreme
законы рынка и
expediency
высшую
together?
целесообразность?
I
Я
think
думаю,
that
что
only with
только
the
с
help of
помощью
harmony.
гармонии.
Why?
Почему?
Only
Только
harmony
гармония
allows us
позволяет
to understand the unity of all
понимать
these
единство
laws.
всех этих
This is the first
законов.
thing.
Это во-первых.
Secondly,
Во-вторых,
in
ни
no
в коем
case should
случае
love
не
be
надо
excluded where it
исключать
can
любовь
manifest
там, где она
itself.
может проявиться.
In no
Ни в коем
case
случае
should
не надо
justice be
исключать
excluded where
справедливость
it can
там,
manifest
где она может
itself.
проявить себя.
If
Если
you
вы
feel that
чувствуете,
you
что вы
can act
можете
fairly, even in
поступить
spite of,
справедливо,
let's
даже
say,
вопреки,
some
допустим,
kind of
какой-то там
competition, act fairly.
конкуренции, поступайте справедливо.
You will be rewarded
Воздастся
and
вам,
have fun.
получите удовольствие.
If you can
Если
love
вы
your
можете, так
competitor,
сказать,
love your
любить своего
competitor, and you
конкурента,
will be rewarded.
любите конкурента.
From my
И
point of
воздастся.
view, it
С
is.
моей точки зрения, это
So,
так.
and this, from my
Вот.
point
И
of
это, с моей
view,
точки зрения,
allows us to
позволяет
do
делать гармонию,
harmony,
которая
which
объединяет
unites different
разные,
opposite and
противоположные,
even
даже
contradictory concepts,
противоречивые
phenomena
понятия,
and
явления и
laws.
законы.
I have a book
На эту
written
тему
on
у
this
меня книжка
topic. It's
написана,
called
называется она
Quantum
«Квантовая
Harmony.
гармония». Я
I'll
ее
show
покажу
it
в
at the
конце.
end. And
Вот.
I
А
will finish
закончу я
with
прекрасными,
Tchev's
так сказать,
beautiful
стихами
poems about
Тютчева по поводу
harmony.
гармонии.
There is melodiousness in the sea
Певучесть
waves,
есть в морских
harmony
волнах,
in
гармония в
spontaneous
стихийных
disputes,
спорах,
and a
и
built-in
стройный
musical rustle
музыкальный
flows in the
шорох
shaky
струится в
reeds.
зыбких
The
камышах.
imperturbable system in
Невозмутимый
everything,
строй во
the
всем,
harmony is
созвучие
complete in
полное в
nature.
природе.
Only
Лишь
in our
нашей
illusory
призрачной свободе
discord,
разлад
we
мы
are
с ней
aware of it.
сознаем.
From where?
Откуда?
How did the
Как
discord
разлад возник?
arise? And why is it that in the general chorus, the
душа
soul
поет не
sings
то,
not
что
like the
море,
sea, and the
и
thinking
ропщет
reed murmurs?
мыслящий тростник.
We are with
Мы с
you,
вами, как
as a
мыслящий
thinking reed,
тростник, ропщем
in
по
general
поводу, так
about
сказать,
injustice and
несправедливости,
other
так
social
сказать, и других, так
deviations.
сказать, социальных отклонений.
But I
Но я
suppose that
предполагаю,
after
что
you have
после того,
listened
как
to
вы
what I have
послушали
told you,
то, что
I
я
hope that
рассказал,
our murmurings with you will
надеюсь,
subside a little.
что наш ропот с вами немножечко утихнет.
If you want to get
Если вы хотите
acquainted with
более
this in
подробно
more
с этим
detail,
познакомиться,
then
то
here
вот у
I
меня
have a
есть сайт,
website,
на
all
нем
my books,
вывешены все
including
мои
on this
книги,
topic.
в
And
том числе и
articles
на
on
эту
this
тему
topic are
статьи,
posted
на
on
эту
it.
тему.
3
Три
articles, even
статьи,
4
даже
articles,
4
are
статьи
published there
опубликованы
on the
там,
website
на сайте,
and
на
are
сайте
accepted to be
Trinitas
published on the website.
опубликованы.
There
Там
you
можно
can read in
подробнейшим образом
detail what I
прочитать
tell
то, что я
orally,
рассказываю устно,
and even read
и
about the
даже
upcoming
почитать о
conversation on
предстоящей
the topic
беседе
of the
на тему
divine world.
божественного мира,
Or watch some
или
of my
посмотреть некоторые
recordings
мои
that are on
записи,
the
которые
YouTube
есть на
channel.
канале на
You
Ютубе.
just type,
Просто
it's
набирайте,
Sergey
Сергей Иванович
Ivanovich, a
появляется
channel
канал.
appears. In
Вот, за
7
сим я как бы
days, I'm
заканчиваю,
kind
так
of
сказать,
finishing the
демонстрацию, и мы с
demonstration,
вами
so to speak, and we'll have a little chat,
немножечко
I think,
побеседуем, я
with
думаю,
Elena at the end.
в конце с
На
Еленой.
Actually,
самом
thank you
деле
so
огромное
much.
спасибо.
Stunningly simple about very
Потрясающе
complex
просто
fundamental
об
things
очень
and
сложных,
concepts.
фундаментальных вещах и понятиях.
Very
Очень
clearly and
наглядно
very
и очень
accessible and
доступно и
intelligible.
доходчиво.
What did you
Что
want
хотела
to
спросить?
ask? It means that
Значит,
this
вот
is a dot at the
в
beginning of the
начале
lecture.
лекции
It was said that
шла
what is
речь
at the
о
bottom is
том,
at the
что то,
top,
что
but
внизу,
not quite
то и
so, and
наверху,
quite on the same
но не
scale,
совсем
and not
так, не
quite
совсем в
identical.
тех масштабах и не совсем идентично.
If we take a
Если мы
tree and take its
дерево
root system
и
of a
берем его
large tree
корневую
and
систему
branches,
большого дерева
foliage,
и ветки, листву,
that's how it is
вот
there as
там
well,
как
or, in general, the root
так же,
system almost
или, в
corresponds to what is
общем,
at the top.
корневая система практически соответствует тому, что наверху.
Well, we have
Ну,
already
вот мы
talked
с вами
about
уже
this
говорили на
topic.
эту тему.
I propose to
Я
write
предлагаю
down,
записать
thereafter, the
там
third topic on the
после
divine world,
третьей
another
темы по
topic that will
божественному
sound
миру
something
еще
like
одну
this.
тему, которая
That's the
будет
working
звучать
title,
примерно
so
так,
to speak.
рабочее название.
Similarity
Подобие
and
и
without
без
similarity in the universe.
подобия во
The
Вселенной.
topics are very interesting.
Темы очень
Why?
интересные. Почему?
Because
Потому
now
что
a
сейчас
huge
огромное
number of
количество
people
людей
are
увлечены,
passionate, so to speak,
так сказать,
about the
словом
word fractal.
фрактал.
They say,
Они
oh,
говорят,
it's a
это
fractal.
И везде,
And there is a
везде
fractal everywhere,
везде
fractal
фрактальные
structures
структуры.
everywhere.
И это
And it
такое
has
модное
become such
поветрие
a
стало, когда
fashionable
люди
fad when
натягивают это
people pull
понятие на
this
все подряд.
concept on everything. In fact,
На самом
fractal
деле
structures
фрактальные
certainly
структуры
exist.
безусловно есть.
What you
То,
said
что вы
here in the
сказали, вот,
forest,
в лесу,
trees are fractals,
деревья, здоровье
Our
—
nervous
это
system
фракталы.
is a
Нервная
fractal.
система наша — это
There
фракталы.
are many fractals
Много
in
фракталов
nature,
в природе.
but I
Но я
want
хочу
to
сказать,
say that
что
fractal
фрактальные
structures,
структуры,
according to my
по моим
ideas,
представлениям,
occupy
занимают в
maybe a
природе,
few
может, несколько
percent in
процентов.
nature. The rest of the massive
Остальная
structures has
масса
absolutely
структур
nothing
совершенно
to do
никакого
with the
отношения к
fractal,
фракталам не имеет.
but nothing.
Ну, никакого.
And I will tell you
И это
this,
я вам
I will
расскажу,
show you,
покажу,
and you
и
will
вы
see
это
it.
увидите.
In nature,
В природе
everything
все
is
устроено
arranged by the
следующим
following
образом. В природе
question.
есть
In nature, there are the
одинаковое,
same, similar, and different.
подобное и разное.
And the combination of the same, similar and different is a very complex combination at different levels in different phenomena. And we need to look at this specifically. And I am a professional in this business. I can tell it all very clearly with pictures, and you will understand everything right away. This is the first one. Secondly, there are only 3 laws of combining similar, identical, and different. Also, there's three. The first law is symmetry. This is when all the same things add up to the same brick wall, relatively speaking. This is harmony. When everything is not the same, it adds up to a whole organism. And the third system, the third law, which can be called a law, although in fact many believe that it is not a law, it is the law of chaos. When both the same and not the same, everything is in a chaotic position and movement.
But nevertheless, this is also the law.
Of course. Of course. And there is no order and no harmony in chaos. But chaos is also necessary as order and harmony. It is a transitional form between one harmony to another, I would say, from one order to another. And without this chaotic transition, the laws of chaos are the most complex laws. Try to catch some kind of law in this chaos. The very word chaos implies absolute lawlessness. I want to say that I have a dream to deal with the laws of lawlessness, with the laws of chaos. If I manage to do this, it will be a very worthy work. But so far, I don't even know firm which side I teach.
But it already sounds amazing.
Yes, approach this topic. I just understand that there is something hidden from us, fantastic so to speak, and how to figure it out. When the wall is brick, the laws of symmetry are very simple. The laws of harmony are also simple, in fact, because they are proportions. Or golden proportions, or proportions there of harmonic combinations in music. Well, proportions. There are some invariants there, and there are no laws here. And probably there is some kind of law. But I hope that there are laws there that I will be able to decipher sometime. Well, as they say, the hopes of young men feed me, too.
Yes, thank you. The second question. In your opinion, going back to the family, is the strongest family a husband, wife, and children, or is it still a harem family?
I think that everything here is very specific, historically individual. The fact is that the harem family, it has fulfilled its role, from my point of view. It was very necessary, important, and I can explain why, in a nutshell. I think it's a harem family now, but it's unrealistic to just talk about it seriously. Although some are brave, they continue, so to speak, to live for 2 families there. And even Alexander II, in my opinion. Yes, he had 2 families there. There was a princess there, in my opinion. She lived above the first family, above the queen. There were kids running around. I watched a program there recently. In other words, in principle, 2 women, 3 women with children are found even in our Russia. In the East, in my opinion, some harem families have also been destroyed. But I want to say, what was the point, the evolutionary meaning of harem families in the past? Why were there so many more of them then? The fact is that then natural selection led to the fact that the elite was sorted very strictly, and there were few elites. It just wasn't enough. And the strongest, most beautiful, most intelligent men got to the top of power. Well, take the Arab world. Here's the Shah, Shahin Shah. Here he is the strongest, the smartest, the most talented organizer. And how can nature not take advantage of this exceptionally good example of masculine qualities and create a bunch of copies of it? Of course. And then there is a harem family, and he has hundreds of children. They're from different women who continued this beautiful line. The same thing that happens in the animal world with lions, sea lions, and ordinary lions. That's it. And, by the way, there was such a rite of the wedding night. I really heard, I didn't read. I don't know how reliable it is in serf Russia. The rite of the wedding night was that the girls who were given in marriage were first led to the wedding night to whom? To the landowner, to the master. And the firstborn was sometimes born not from her husband, but from her master. And then this noble blood, which came from nowhere to this Russia, remained among the children. These children grew up, became somewhere maybe Lomonosov, somewhere maybe Mendeleev, somewhere maybe someone else. That is, there was also such a way there. And women, after all, put their hand on their heart, agree, they still strive to leave offspring from the best man in society, right? And some women turn a blind eye to the fact that this best man is from another family. They turn a blind eye to it. I know such examples. Here, in other words, it is important that their child, that same genetic, spiritual, or at least genetic inheritance, has, so to speak, a continuation from the best man. These are animal laws. We are not going anywhere away from them. Choosing the best. If there was no better choice, then the degradation would be biological. Well, did I answer you somehow?
Yes. Thank you.
Спасибо.
I'm out of
У меня
questions.
вопросы закончились.
Let's hope
Будем
that our
надеяться,
viewers
что
and
наши
listeners will
зрители и
ask them.
слушатели их будут задавать.
The knowledge that you
То
have given
знание,
us today
которое вы нам
will
сегодня
definitely help us
дали,
reach the height of
точно
heaven.
поможет достичь высоты небес.
And what do you
А как
think,
считаете
dear
вы, дорогие
friends?
друзья?
Write in the
Пишите
comments.
в комментариях.
Subscribe to our channel.
Подписывайтесь на наш канал.
Have a nice day.
Всего доброго.
Until new
До новых
meetings.
встреч.
And until the
И
next
до
series of
следующей
topics,
серии
the absolute good of
тематики
evolution.
«Абсолютное благо эволюции».
Thank you.
Спасибо.
All the best.
Всех благ,
Good luck.
успехов.